All right, out of respect for everybody's time, I appreciate everybody that's been sitting here throughout this entire meeting and listening to a robust discussion on Valley Junction, very important issue, and all the ins and outs of that, and I expect this will be just as exciting here tonight. So I want to start out by just kind of walking through how this is going to go. And I want to start out by saying we have all received your emails, your communications, both pro and con on this issue. We have been trying the best we can as a council to listen, hear what you have to say, take it all in and absorb it, and we look forward to a robust discussion tonight. We're going to have staff. Brian Hemeseth, our city engineer, is going to present and kind of go through the ins and outs of the project, lay out all the facts here. After that, we're going to have some question and answer between council and staff, and then we're going to open it up to the public. And I'm going to ask that everybody, out of respect for everyone's time that wants to talk tonight, a couple things. Number one, 3 minutes or less for everybody here. Number two, please do not, I don't want to hear just a ton of repeating. Before I open it up to the audience, I'm going to ask for people to stand to hear whether you're for the road project or against the road project, for the trail, against the trail, so I can see, who's here and who's in favor and who's opposed. Okay? Brian, take it away.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Very good. I think the mayor did a fine job of explaining why we're here. I am Brian Hemeseth. I'm the city engineer. And he also went through what we're going to do for the workshop tonight. Actually, Nate Hardesty from Shive Hattery is going to do a majority of the presentation. It'll be a little bit of repeat for those that came to the meeting, a little bit of repeat for the Public Services Committee, Councilman McKinney and Councilman Trevelyan. So you've seen a lot of this before. But we thought it was important to lay out all the facts so that the city council can make an informed decision on how the staff should move forward. And that is the one thing I ask, is that get your questions answered tonight, because we would like a direction on how to move forward, no matter what the direction is. So,
And Brian, before you get it, I'd like to make one more comment.
Sure thing.
We are going to give time for people that want to speak to come to the microphone and speak. I don't want to have people yelling stuff out from the audience, pro or con. I don't want to have clapping or booing or people just yelling stuff from the ninth row. Please be respectful of everybody here tonight and speak when it's your turn to speak, okay? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll mention that all the meetings we've had so far, folks have been respectful.
Yep, and we've had, what, 3 workshops?
That from everybody.
We've had 3 public...
Three public meetings. And, it's been very good discussion. And
I agree.
I hope that continues here tonight. So, let's see, what am I missing? So I want to lay it out real quickly, the things that have been contentious throughout this whole thing, and I want to make sure you understand what it is that we're wanting direction on. There has been some discussion on we're going from 4 lanes, 4, 9, and 10-foot lanes, to 3 12-foot lanes, and that is across the entire stretch from 1st to 50th, and we had to get that because we needed to figure that out before we started this first portion from 19th to 23rd. And then there's also been some discussion on how wide the lanes need to be in this 3-lane cross section. So that's another thing that will come up tonight. We'll talk about it. I'm sure there'll be folks in the audience talking about it. So that's something that we need to make sure we have clear direction on. And the last is the multi-use trail, and whether that is constructed as a part of this project or it is not. And those are the things I just wanted to plant the seed, so that as you're watching this, you're pulling in all the information you need to make that decision. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to turn it over to Nate Hardesty, and he's going to run you through the project.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mayor and Council. As Brian said, my name is Nate Hardesty. I'm a civil engineer with Shive Hattery. I'm going to try to get through this as quick as we can to respect everybody's time, but I do want to lay out the facts of where we are today. So we're going to talk about a few things, what the existing conditions are, what our recommendations are, so you know what those are before we get into the details. And then after the recommendations, we're going to back up and talk about the need for change, the benefits. With any change, there's some pros and cons, so we're going to talk about those drawbacks, what guidance is out there and how we got to where we are today, what else was considered, and then you've already kind of touched on the public meeting, and we'll go over just the history of that briefly. So what's out there today? Ashworth Road, 4-lane, minor arterial. We'll touch more about what that means in a little bit, but 4-lane street, sidewalks on both sides, some photos of it. You're all familiar and have seen this, I'm sure. So existing roadway configuration. The lanes out there today are narrow, as Brian mentioned. This particular portion is between 19th and 23rd. That's the first construction project to go due to the pavement condition. But narrow lanes. Other parts of the corridor, the lanes are still narrow. Some places are a little bit wider, 10 feet. Sidewalk on both sides, lots of utilities underground. As Brian mentioned, the plan to change to is 3 12-foot lanes. So those 3 12-foot lanes are the same width, 36 feet, as the 4 9-foot lanes. So the road is essentially in the same spot, other than a couple turn lanes that we'll talk about. It adds the shared use path on the north side. So this graphic, you'll see this several times. When you look at this, this is facing east. Shared use path is on the left. That would be the north side. And then we've got some dimensions on here that we'll go over how we got to each one. So backing up a little bit, what is the need and why would we want to change anything? So first, the infrastructure is old. Some of this was paved as early as the 1920s. There was lots of paving done in the 1960s and 70s, some widening and reconstruction. We've done some asphalt overlays, mill and overlay, really just the top 2 inches. Eventually, we have to tackle the whole problem. And while we're at it, we'll fix some of the concerns related to storm sewer and other utilities while we're there. Safety is the other part. This is some crash data. The takeaway here is the red and yellow dots are preventable with the type of work we're planning to do here. Got a lot of detail on those accidents if we need to go into them. I'm not going to talk about these specifically. Eric Peterson, Principal Traffic Engineer for the city, has a ton more detail here as well. So talking about the safety benefits, the 4 to 3 lane roadway conversion that Brian mentioned, the biggest benefit there is today when you try to cross that street, if you're on a side street, you've got to cross 4 lanes, 2 in each direction. When you go down to 3 lanes, you have a single lane of traffic in each direction with the turn lane in the middle. So only have 2 through lanes of traffic to cross. So you cut the number of conflict points in half if you're crossing the street or if you're turning onto the street, what's shown in this graphic here. Similarly, when you go to turn, if you're on Ashworth, you want to make a left turn. Today, you stop in a through lane as you signal to go left. You're subject to a rear end collision there. In the 3 lane roadway section, you can move out of that through lane and into the shared turn lane as you wait to make your left turn. When you do go to make your left turn in the condition today, on the left, you have to cross 2 lanes of traffic. Sometimes you cannot see the car behind the car in the inside lane. You can't see the car in the outside lane. In the 3 lane roadway section, you only have a single lane coming at you, so you can see all the traffic that's approaching you. This is an example of what happens when you don't have that visibility that you would in a 3 lane. So this was an accident at 39th and Ashworth in September. It was right near Valley High School. So that black SUV that made the left turn couldn't see the oncoming gray sedan because it was blocked by the cars in the left turn lane. This is the exact type of accident we're talking about being able to prevent with the 3 lane roadway section there. One more point of I want to make here, where the SUV ended up, it went over the curb into the grass. So anytime we can put a distance between any pedestrian or bicycle facility that's not on the street, we like to maximize those. Safety data, I'll go through this real quickly, but 19% to 47% reduction when you get in crashes when you change from a 4 lane to a 3 lane street. That's from the Federal Highway Administration. There's a lot of academic studies that went into that, and that's the data that is the result, though. Another item on safety. Today, when you have a 4 lane roadway, if there's a traffic accident, sometimes that can get clogged up in all 4 lanes because you've got traffic in all 4 lanes. The 3 lane gives a predictable path, again, from Federal Highway Administration, predictable path for emergency responders. We also spoke to Chief Liu. He agrees and supports the 3 lane roadway section as far as emergency response goes in the city of West Des Moines. Lane width. So this is the lane pictures that are out there today. The lanes are 9 to 10 feet wide. Some of the vehicles just don't fit. You can see the DART bus in the middle. It's overhanging the lane line. It's shied away from the curb, which will be important here in a few minutes, and doesn't fit in the lanes today. The photo on the left, that vehicle fits within the lane. That doesn't count its mirrors. The right side, the trailer, again, overhanging the lane line. So this is pretty common out there because this is a minor arterial, as I mentioned. It's also a truck route and a bus route. It's not a neighborhood collector or a local street. It's a major arterial through the city, as you're all aware. What we see a lot of times, because people are uncomfortable with those narrow lanes, they stagger. So the picture on the left is vehicles staggered. There's one in the outside lane, one in the inside lane, one in the outside lane, and they just drive that way. So a lot of times it functions more like a two-lane street, which supports the three-lane ideology where there's one lane in each direction that it can still operate efficiently. Photo on the right, when they do go to pass, they hang over the lane line. They're actually in oncoming traffic in that scenario. The path specifically, so this is the map of the whole city. So the bottom and left sides of this, a lot of that's undeveloped. Where you see all the blue lines, that's the existing shared use path network. So as we zoom into the upper right-hand corner, this map is bounded on the left by Jordan Creek Parkway, south by Mills Civic Parkway and Fuller Road, and the city limits on the north and east. North is up here. The upper right-hand corner of this is the area that we're talking about. It's a trail desert. There are no trail and shared use path infrastructure existing today in that area. When I change the slide here, there'll be a red line in that spot. So that red line is where we're talking about putting this. That becomes the backbone for any future shared use path, bicycle infrastructure, trails in the area. Current city master plan for shared use path and trails is this document here. Now, a lot of these are on the side streets that connect to Ashworth, 39th Street, 19th, a couple others. Those aren't planned now, but without Ashworth as the backbone, there's nowhere for those to go. And so the Ashworth Road is kind of the linchpin to be able to get a shared use path network to provide the same level of service to this area of town as provided to the other areas of West Des Moines with the shared use path network. There's no other spot to get east-west across that portion of the city. No other east-west road goes all the way across. There aren't any greenways to put the trails in. Citizen survey, I want to talk about that a little bit. So this first slide here is a takeaway. Overall, West Des Moines scored significantly above the other cities in the Plains region, which is neighboring states, in every category surveyed. All 51 categories, West Des Moines significantly above. The survey actually says West Des Moines sets the standard. So that's credit to all of you, staff, and even the residents about the great job that the city of West Des Moines does. And because of that, there's only one high priority listed for any city department, one in the whole city, and that's street maintenance. So we're hoping to take care of that here with the road project. But when we actually dive into the trail and Parks and Rec, there are areas for services that need to be emphasized in lots of different departments. So Parks and Rec, the number one and number two, are walking and biking trails with the city and access to desired destinations via that network of walking and biking trail. Those are consistently the number one and number two Parks and Rec services that people ask for in these citizen surveys. It's the top two there, far and away above all the others. Similarly, one of them, access to destinations via the bike trail, that would be the existing network, actually has the most dissatisfied responses. It's only 9% on the right side there, but it's the most of any category in the surveys. This is, again, 2022 data. When we look at how many residents think they should make it easier to travel by bicycle within the city, the yellow and blue boxes, that total 74% of the city think we should make it easier to travel by bicycle. And again, when we looked at that map, this whole area of town doesn't have any infrastructure to do that. How many people believe it's easy today? The two blue ones add up to 42% believe it's easy today to get around by bicycle versus the 74% who think we should expand it. These results are 2022 results, but they're consistent amongst other surveys. So this looks back to 2016, and the percentages for all the things I've just went over stay pretty much the same. Walking and biking trails, access to destinations, consistently the 1 and 2 items, or at least in the top 3. The 70-some% who believe you should make it, or believe it's important to be able to access places and make it easier to access places via the bike trail, stays about the same. Same with the 42% that thinks it's easy today. Pretty consistent over time in many different surveys. So what are the downsides? So this is new information if you were at some of the public meetings. We talked a lot about the benefits, not necessarily the negative, so I wanted to spend a few minutes on that today for all of you on council here. So the first one, on the road today, there is no dedicated bicycle facility. Yes, you can ride on the sidewalk, that's legal. Yes, you can ride on the street, that's also legal. When we drop from 4 lanes to 3, though, we're taking that lane that bikers do use today, and we're putting all the traffic in one lane. So to now, if there's a bicycle in that outside lane, people can pass them using the other lane because you got 2 lanes in one direction. That goes away in the 3-lane roadway section. And so we're really taking away where even the bikers that are on the street today will probably feel less comfortable potentially in the 3-lane section because they'll be passed in what is essentially the center lane, which is not a passing lane. That's the reason if we don't put the shared use path in, we can't provide for that mode of transportation at all. Yes, it's legal to ride on the sidewalk, but no, it's not designed for that. The shared use path is the only portion of this actually designed to accommodate a bicyclist. Without it, we don't accommodate that mode of transportation. Slow-moving vehicles is another one, similar to the bike in the outside lane. If you get a delivery truck out there and they stop, how do you get around them? That's a concern, and we would expect that people will pass them in that center lane. Now, that's a stopped vehicle. It's not a slow vehicle like a bicycle would be, potentially. And the other part that's somewhat a benefit of that single lane when there is a slow vehicle, or even somebody driving the speed limit, the person that would today speed down Ashworth, use both lanes to do so, merge in and out, they're caught behind anybody driving the speed limit. So potentially the highest end, top end speeds will come down with the 4 to 3 lane conversion. Traffic operations is a concern. This is a map of Ashworth and 22nd. North is up here, so the intersection in the middle is 22nd and Ashworth. There's been extensive traffic modeling done by the city. Eric Peterson, the principal traffic engineer, did it all. He could speak a lot more in depth of the details of that if we need. But basically, the road will function just fine, similar to it is today if we add as 3 lanes for the entire corridor with the addition of 2 turn lanes, one at 22nd and one at 19th. We need right turn lanes in those 2 locations for the north-south traffic that goes on 19th, Ashworth for a few blocks, and then up 22nd, or vice versa if you're coming down from the interstate. That north-south traffic uses that 3 blocks, and so we need the right turn lanes to be able to get them on and off of there.
So it's only 2 right turn lanes in this entire stretch? 19th and 22nd?
2 ones that do not exist today. So Valley West, 8th Street, some of those exist today.
Okay.
Only 2 additional, yes.
2 additional.
The other part, relative to the path, there's a lot of driveways and street crossings out there. It would be great if those didn't exist and we had a shared use path or a trail without any obstructions, but there just isn't another spot for it. There's nowhere else to put it.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt. This is exactly what I'm talking about. I understand you're adamantly against it, and that's fine, and I respect that, but I'm going to ask no outbursts. You'll have your chance to speak, so.
It's also not uncommon to have a shared use path cross driveways and streets. They're down almost every collector and arterial street in the city of West Des Moines, and any new street has them as well, of that classification. The other negative is right-of-way acquisition. We're going to talk a lot about this, I'm sure, and we'll hear it. This is a slide from the 19th to 23rd public meeting. In that particular stretch where we're at the first project to be built, we've got enough design done that we know what we need for right-of-way acquisition. Now, that may change here today, and that's fine, but we don't have the design done. We wouldn't say that, but we have enough done that we're ready to talk to homeowners about the specific needs and get appraisals done. So when we have an appraisal done, there's a professional real estate appraiser hired by the city. They go out and appraise what is this piece of right-of-way worth, what is the value of anything in it, trees, landscaping, et cetera, whatever it might be. What is the value of the overall property? Is there a diminished value when we're done? And take all those things into account. Residents have the opportunity to meet with those appraisers. They also have the opportunity to seek their own appraisal if they don't agree with that appraisal before we move into the negotiation phase and eventually transfer of title if needed. And we're only there from 19th to 23rd. Other areas, it's really difficult to say exactly how much it is, but the corridor is pretty similar if you go down there today. Give you an idea what that looks like between 19th and 23rd, just as an example. The orange is temporary construction easement. Those are only during construction. That's to rebuild driveways, repair landscaping that's needed to be repaired after construction. The blue, which is along the shared use path, and then in the turn lanes, is actual property acquisition to make this work. And through this section. A couple things on property value. There's some data from National Association of Realtors and National Association of Home Builders about amenities like shared use paths and trails are desirable when people seek homes. Again, those would probably be better in a green space. That doesn't exist. That doesn't mean they still don't want access to them in this whole area of town. Furthermore, there's some data out there talking about the roadway conversion itself, the road diet, 4 to 3 lane conversion, that those don't impact property values negatively. In fact, I think the road today, when you go out there, it feels like a busy street, even if there's no cars, because it's got 4 lanes. It'll feel a little bit more like a collector street, which is a lower classification of roadway when it only has 1 lane in each direction. Potentially feels less busy. So what are the details and where do we get the guidance from? So Again, this is the configuration. We're going to try to walk through how we got the numbers on here, the 12 foot, the 10 foot, all those things. There's a lot of guidance out there. Some of the guidance is national, some of it's local. We end up using the local data or the local guidance. The local guidance, though, comes from the national guidance. The national guidance takes into account all the research on the subject, and then we rely on those to follow through. And then they're all guidelines. We can make changes to them as we need. One of them in particular, in the bottom left-hand corner, that one takes into account lots of different context, what the land use is, what the speed limit is it urban, suburban, rural, and a lot of that data flows down into these guidance. So one on the top right, that's SUDAS. That is an Iowa guidance called Statewide Urban Design and Specification, SUDAS. We'll talk more about that. And a lot of the data, or a lot of the items come from that SUDAS document, but the national guidance flows into those and how it's applied in Iowa. So I want to talk a little about SUDAS values and lane width. So the top is the preferred values from SUDAS for this type of road, this classification, residential, 35 mile an hour speed limit, minor arterial, and how wide things should be. So total is 43 feet. So that's 12 foot through lanes, 14 foot center turn lane, 2.5 foot curb offset on each side. Acceptable guidance in SUDAS, the next one down, totals 37 feet. All the numbers shrink down a little bit. So I talked about before, we're actually proposing 36 feet. So we're smaller than what SUDAS would say is acceptable. Acceptable is their lowest level of guidance. Now, I think someone could say, well, is it actually going to work? Yeah, we believe it will. There's other 36-foot wide 3-lane streets in the city of West Des Moines that function just fine. The point is that I want to make is we've narrowed the roadway as much as we could, and I'll talk more about that and some alternatives here in just a few minutes. And the biggest difference is that curb offset I've highlighted in yellow. We set that at 0. So when we saw that dart bus shying away from the curb, that's because there's not a gutter section or an offset from the lane width to the face of curb. So you can't just look at the lane width being 12 feet when you consider how wide they should be. If we called these 10-foot lanes with a 2-foot curb offset, we'd have the exact same width. And it'll really function more like a 10.5-foot lane or maybe an 11-foot lane than it will an actual 12-foot lane because we don't have that guidance on the side or that offset on the side.
Is that just a semantic difference for the most part, going back to that, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, I mean, we could call it 10-foot lanes, 2-foot offset, and it would, again, be the same thing. The standard, if somebody comes in to, say, develop a new collector street, and they say it's going to be a 3-lane roadway section, it's the same 36 feet, 312s that's done. And how we name it, it's a little bit less confusing when we call it this way, because if you go out there with a tape measure and measure it versus if we said, well, 10 and 2, there's no physical delineation there. There's not a line painted or anything like that. So.
Okay, thanks.
Total right-of-way width, minor arterial, if you were to build a new one today, typically 100 to 120 feet to fit everything in, including utilities and all sorts of things I'll talk about here in a minute. This one is currently proposed at 72.5 feet. So we're cramming a lot of stuff into a small space to try to get the footprint as small as we can. Shared use path. So this is an example between Prairie View and 60th on Ashworth, existing shared use path. It's the best example we have. It was built a few years ago. It'll look very similar to this along these other sections of Ashworth when we're done. One key benefit I want to point out before we talk into how we got to all the widths is once we put a shared use path in, the city maintains that. That's future replacement, cracks, panels, settlement, whatever. Those are the responsibility of the city after that. That's citywide on all your shared use paths. And the city takes care of the snow removal for all the property owners there. If you have a sidewalk today, you clear the snow. If you have a shared use path, the city clears the snow. So the path's planned at 10 foot wide. Part of the reason for that is the snow plows are about 8 foot wide. We don't want the snow plows driving right on the edge for a couple reasons. If they drive right on the edge, they tend to break the edges of the trail off. They'll crack them. And so giving the path a little bit extra width allows them not to be damaged. And it also allows them to keep the snow plow from getting off into the grass and tearing up people's yards. So that's a lot of the reason that it's 10 feet. Along with the guidance from SUDAS, basically says to use 10 feet as a typical trail width unless you expect very few pedestrians or do not have regular maintenance vehicles. And we don't have either one of those. Pedestrians are probably the highest use of this potential path, and there will be routine snow removal in the winter months. So the buffer area, the green space, we showed this at 13 feet through all the public meetings. We did recently reduce that to 10 through that 19th to 23rd Street section. And we're going to talk about what's in that 10 feet. So the biggest one is a safety buffer. We're trying to keep it away from the street just to give people the comfort level to be present there. We talked about that traffic accident. A vehicle leaves the road, where does it go? We're trying to give them a place to just be able to get away from it if we can. There are a few things we have to accommodate in there. So 4 to 6 feet, that's a clear zone. Basically, we don't want anything in there that's immovable, something that a vehicle could leave the street and hit, like a pole or a fire hydrant. So those are out, and where I've got shown here is fixed objects. And then similarly, the trail has a 2-foot lateral clearance. We need clear of obstructions, even signs or anything that could, for instance, catch a bicycle handle for somebody going by. So those are all the things we're trying to fit in that area. Another one is snow storage. We got to put the snow from the street somewhere. It ends up in that green space. And when the city plows the snow off the trail, it's got to go somewhere. It ends up in that same green space. So we need to be able to fit those in there. And then I've got a strip there called secondary snow clearing. On these arterial streets, Public Services comes back with a wing plow and they push some of that snow back so they have room for the next snowfall, especially after big snowfall events. So what's that look like? This is on Valley West Drive, 7.5 foot green space there. This one is extreme, but we can get a lot of snow and we need a place to put it in those areas. Another one on Valley West Drive where it's too close. This is a frequent complaint where the plows actually throw the snow beyond into the path. You can see in the back there's actually a piece that's slid off. It's just, again, it's too small. So, last one, underground utilities. There's a lot of utilities that need a place to go. There's a lot of utilities that already exist in the green space that's there today. So this is on Ashworth near the fire station, just east of the fire station, looking east. All those flags out there are underground utilities. So if you trace all those, it looks something like this under there. Green is sanitary and storm sewer. Yellow is gas main. Red is underground power. All the orange is utilities. Could be fiber optic. Could be phone line. There's a lot of stuff out there today. There's also the handholds for them, the manhole lids. Some of those are in that existing green space. If we encroach on that, we will either do one of two things: relocate them, or have to put their boxes in the trail, which is not desirable from all sorts of reasons: bikes running over it, trip hazards, snowplows hitting it. Lots of companies out there too. This is just the ones from 19th to 23rd. If you look at that 50-block stretch, there's going to be a whole bunch of people that actually own those utilities. So what else was considered? Just got a few more slides here. There were lots of things considered. The takeaway I want to leave you with here is the first 5 items here, or there's 4A, had 4A and B, there were 2. So there's actually 6 items. This was in the initial study that was done in 2020. And when this study got done, basically said, well, which one of these handles the volume, which ones doesn't? There were some recommendations. The first thing staff did was say, hey, we need a different alternative, and they added one that made the roadway smaller. This alternative 6, as it's called in the study, was the smallest footprint of the roadway of all the alternatives considered. Basically what staff said is, let's make it fit inside the existing roadway. The original study used some of the guidance where they had those curb offsets that I'm talking about, and staff said, well, we really need this to fit. They did have 5 lanes between 19th and 23rd in that original study. And since then, our current version, we've taken that 5-lane section, made it 3, and just have the minimum we need for turn lanes to make it function as it does today. And we've got the right-of-way acquisition down to 2.7 acres from all of those others. I think the lowest one was 5. So that's a combination of 2 factors. One, going from 5 to 3, from alternative 6 to the current, and moving that trail in from 13 to 10 across the whole length of those 50 blocks. So the takeaway here is the alternative we have today, it's the smallest of any alternative that there was, both on the actual amount of paving and the footprint of the right-of-way acquisition. We're a couple public meetings. You went over these. There were 3 of them. Lots of feedback on both sides at all of those, and I'm sure we'll have more today. And you've, of course, had a lot of feedback. And with that, that's the end of my planned remarks. I would maybe turn it back over to Brian or
Okay, Brian,
Real quick.
you're going.
Yep, just wanted to talk about some of the feedback I've been getting. Obviously, it was alluded to earlier, there's a number of red signs along the street. Happened to be my phone number that was on that on those signs. I got to know a lot of really nice people in West Des Moines in these past few weeks, and we've had a lot of nice discussions. And frankly, the feedback I've been getting falls right along with everything in the citizen survey. I had about 100% of the people that talked to me were in favor of the 3-lane conversion. They think the lanes are just too narrow now. They know it's going to be safer. They're talked about their young kids learning how to drive and that sort of thing. That's the kind of feedback I got. As far as the trail goes, 75% of the people I talked to were in favor of the trail. I have all the names, addresses, everything. If anybody wants to see that, I'd be happy to share it with them. So I wanted to give that feedback. I don't know that I have anything else.
Do you want to maybe address some of the questions, concerns that have been sent in, emailed, that
Oh,
you've
sure.
responded, maybe for the benefit of everybody
Nate,
here?
Yeah, Nate did a good job of
Okay.
kind of covering those things as far as like lane widths and everything. And I know that there were some studies that were sent to us on lane widths. Sunday afternoon sat and watched a football game and read through all of it. And I did a little research on the folks that did it, where all the information was coming from. I don't want to discount all the work that these folks are doing, but some of that work, or most of that work, was in cities like Tokyo, Japan, Toronto. They're really looking at downtown areas as far as getting lane widths narrower. I believe that.
So there are people that have contacted us that have said that we should do narrower lane widths.
Right, yeah,
And you're
10,
addressing that.
11-foot lane widths with the 3-lane cross-section that we have out there today.
Okay.
And then, so one of the biggest things that I want to mention that Nate didn't mention is take the storm we had on Friday. A lot of rain. You have stormwater spreading into the gutter line, and it's usually 1-2 feet. When it gets heavier, it can get farther in. If you take your 12-foot lane and you narrow it down by 1, 2, potentially 3 feet during a rainstorm, you're effectively narrowing up your lanes to 9 or less potentially feet, which is not. And it rains in Iowa. We do get rain, and also snow. Brett and those folks are really good at plowing snow. But the very first pass he goes through, I spoke to him today, he said, yeah, they don't get all the way to the curb. It's just not efficient. They're trying to get those roads open and get them ready to go, get at least people down those roads. There's always about 1 foot to 1.5 foot of snow from that curb, effectively narrowing up those lanes. And when we only have 1 lane in each direction, when we're narrowing that up, that's not something that, as your city engineer, that I'm comfortable with recommending. So
Okay.
that's my spiel on
Okay.
lane widths.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
Okay.
I'm finished.
I'm going to open it up real quick to the council. We're going to go one time. Each council person that wants to comment, we're going to start with Doug. You don't have to say something. If you want to, go ahead. Try to keep it to 3 minutes if you can.
First thing I'll say is thank you for the presentation today. It's very informative. Being a technology person by background, I don't know anything about this stuff, so I love these types of presentations. I also love it when constituents, even if they're not in Ward 3, reach out to me. I do read them all. I don't respond to you all, but I do to some people. One of the things, the things that I come down to, I would love to have a bike path. I think Ashworth Road needs some work done on it. I initially am favoring the 3 lanes, but if I were to live on Ashworth Road, I can't see taking 20 more feet of somebody's yard and putting in a path. And I know that's my roundabout math in my head. I know that's not the exact numbers, but to me, it's really hard for me to see that, especially when it hasn't been that way for so long. And so maybe my perception's wrong here, but I've heard a lot of the folks in Kevin's ward reaching out to me. I drive that road all the way down to 801 Ashworth every day, twice a day, sometimes 4 times a day. I'm very familiar with the area. And so I don't know how we can put in that multi-use path. Even though I would personally love it, I would hate it if they put it through my yard. So.
Okay. Thank you, Doug. Kevin?
Yeah, Brian, you talked about that 75% of the people you talk to want the bike path. How many of those live on Ashworth and are affected? Obviously, there's people from other neighboring streets, I'm sure, that have contacted you as well, because they're going to be driving this 3-lane road and probably had questions. But I'm really curious because what I've heard from the various residents that I'm not seeing 75%. So if you talk to 5, then yeah, 2 of them want it, okay, but.
I get what your question is. Yeah, I mean, there was probably 17, 18 people that I logged that I talked to. There was more people that called me, but a lot of people just shouted things at me and then hung up. And pro and con, so that's fine. I've got thick skin. But yeah, there was, I know of at least 2 people on that road that are in favor of a bike trail that would be directly affected.
So out of 50 blocks, 2 people. I'm just trying to do the math here.
There was
Okay.
2.
Okay, thank you.
And all the rest were just off of the road.
One other question I've got is,
Try to speak up if you guys can. We're having some people having a hard time hearing.
one other question I've got, and this is probably for Nate, since he put this whole thing together. How do you propose to put a trail on Ashworth west of Woodland Park Drive? Because those houses, some of them back up in that area from a cul-de-sac. Actually, I think it's east of there as well, but about the area of Woodland Park Drive. There's a cul-de-sac that backs up to it. Then you've got the pond from the townhouses, and then you've got the big retaining wall up there at 50th and Ashworth. We building a bridge?
Yeah, that's the hardest part.
Almost impossible.
What I would say is we don't know the answer to that because we're not designing that portion of the roadway yet. That might be 10 or 15 years away. And I would encourage you to not make a decision about 19th to 23rd Street that precludes the future use of that section as a trail based on something that's 30 blocks away.
But how can you not, when this is an overall design for 50 blocks, and
Yeah.
you're saying that we have to have this trail from 1st to 50th to connect everything?
Yeah, the other item at 50th Street, so that's already widened. It's 5 lanes there. You've got 2 through lanes in each direction and the turn lane in the middle. When you drop to 3 lanes, you're going to lose a through lane on the north side of that roadway because you won't have, and you've already got the other lanes that you need. So there is an option to potentially shift the center line of that intersection to the north to help get that path in. And we may have to make some concessions on how far away it is from the roadway because you're right. There's a retaining wall there that looks into the 2nd story of those homes right off of 50th.
But
That's a very difficult section to get.
Okay, I'll give you that you got 5 lanes and you can take 1 for the bike path. But east of there, and I can't remember what street it is that the houses back up to Ashworth. 45th? Thank you. How do you deal with that one? Because that's 4-lane road.
Yeah.
Yeah, you shift.
So another section, that section is actually, the road's a little bit wider. It's about 40 feet wide because it's 4 10-foot lanes. So the road itself is going to get narrower there. So you can't measure off the existing curb in that particular location. So do we know exactly how we're going to do it? No, because it hasn't been designed and planned. That doesn't mean we can't make it work when the time comes.
Okay.
Okay, Kevin, other questions? We're not that you're going to not have other questions as we go, but
Oh, you know me very well.
I know all of us. I know all of us very well. Yeah. Go ahead, Renee.
Okay, good, thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you for the presentation. I learned a lot. And I want to thank everyone that's here tonight. It is 8:16. I know you could be doing a lot of other things, but you're here because you care about what's happening. And so it's always nice to see citizen engagement. And I don't know who is for it and who's not. I don't know whether it's divided half and half or probably
Find
not.
that out in a second.
Probably not. But so I'm going to yield a lot of my time to the folks that have come here to speak because as an elected official, I've always developed the motto of listen, learn, and lead. And so I can always ask technical questions later, but I'm here to listen to the folks that came out tonight to speak to the people that are elected. So that's where I stand.
Okay, thank you, Renee. I'll keep my comments very brief. I appreciate the presentation. I appreciate everybody that came out to the 3 different open houses that we had. I recognize many of you from that. I made 2 of the 3 of those. We're here to listen. We're here to think through this whole thing, just like the Valley Junction area. You guys love the area that you live in, and this is very personal to you. And we've heard from both sides, pro and con, and we're here to listen to you and make a decision afterwards. So, Matt, go ahead.
All right, thank you. I guess first, on a lighthearted item, I was driving down Ashworth this morning and wanted to make sure that I, took some time to really go back and evaluate where things are at, and I obviously there's been reference today to the red signs, and so I saw several of the signs, of which there are more signs than I anticipated. Frankly, there's more red signs out there than there are political signs, and on the day before the election, that's pretty impressive. But anyway, you know what? I'm going to call this number. I got to figure out who's behind this. I got to pick up the phone and call, and so I call, and I had a good conversation with Brian this morning. I didn't realize, I thought I was going to be calling somebody that was, very much opposed to it, as opposed to somebody that's, going through the design process. But anyway, I guess, Nate, I appreciate the diagrams. Some of those diagrams, like this photo here, let me back up. I think on the road configuration, I don't have a lot of heartburn over that, and that is absolutely something we brought up during public services. And Brian, I know that I was maybe a little critical during that meeting. I was, hey, we need to have some stats here, and we need to develop a one-pager and some data. And I know you've gone through that process, and I appreciate you and your staff and everybody doing that. My largest concern is the path. Hey, I'm a runner. I'm a biker. I use these paths regularly, and I think when we can have them, it makes a lot of sense. But I think we also, at least for me, if it looked like this photo here, probably less concern. When I say that, I mean I see a relatively decent amount of distance. Right? Some people would argue that to the right-hand side of the screen, as I'm looking at it, between the path and the home. But as I drove down Ashworth today, and as I've done for years, you look at that, but when I look at it with the perspective of what if we were to take up an additional distance, I'm concerned about what that might mean. And there are several areas along Ashworth where it might make sense, where there's several homes that are, pushed back quite a ways. There's the business solver and other areas where folks may not care. But I tend to agree with the concept of, if the intent here is to truly connect from 1st to 50th, and I recognize the comment about, right there around 50th Street, we should have an overall plan, right, that takes into consideration how that's going to happen. And if it can happen in a way that works, then that lends itself to one answer. But if we can't have it be comprehensive in nature from 1st to 50th, where you do have that 10 feet, I would struggle to understand how that pieces together. So that's just some initial where I'm at as I look forward to hearing the comments and appreciate the work that's been done.
Perfect. Thanks, Matt. Okay, Greg.
I'll try to be brief too. And again, thank you everybody for waiting. I know it was a long meeting, and so really grateful for that. Just two comments. Just like driving around on Ashworth, like I was the other day, between 19th and 23rd, 22nd Street. It's snug. It's just snug. And looking through, can you go to that, the potential design for 19th to 22nd, which is specifically the topic again. I know a lot of folks are here about the entire 1st to 50th Street, and definitely want to hear from you. But as you said, Nate, like when it comes to 19th to 22nd Street, you had an extended.
I'll find it eventually.
Oh yeah, it's there. My question really is about.
Getting quite a shout out here tonight with his yard sign.
Oh yeah.
Smart man.
So my specific question relates to not to the sidewalk width, not to the width of the lanes, but to that green space, sometimes called parking, whatever you want to call it. It's a regional thing to call it green space or parking or whatever, but the area between the sidewalk and the street. Nate, you had mentioned that you had worked to bring it down from like 12 feet to 10 feet. Were you specifically talking about in this region?
Yes.
You had said, and I can't remember if I got the numbers exactly right.
Correct. So in the public meetings prior, we've been talking about about that being 13 feet. And we've since backed that down to 10 feet. Now, when we showed you the areas of right-of-way acquisition, that 10 feet is applied to the entire 50 blocks. So the proposal is to move it in 3 feet farther than we had it before. There are a few places right at the intersection of 22nd. I think we actually have it at 9 feet there. There's a house there on the northwest corner that's pretty close. And we're trying not to affect their driveway to the extent that it's much worse than it is today. And so we actually got it at 9 feet right there. So I think we'll move that around a little bit as we can. It's 9.5 there today. We're about the same. And when the path gets about 6 feet wider, we need about 6.5 feet of property from most property owners in the corridor. That's the typical 6.5 feet.
Sure. And I'm appreciative of that because the 13 down to 10 or even 9.5 is pretty enormous. When you say that, are you referring to the north side of the street or the south side of the
The
street?
north side. The south side, we're not planning to do anything other than put the sidewalk back where it is, except for in the right turn lane at 19th Street, where we got to have that right turn lane to make the 3-lane road operate. There's, I think, 5 properties in there that are affected by that. Other than that, the sidewalk on the south would remain where it is for the whole length.
And the green space, the parking would be remaining the same width as well?
It'll actually get about 1 foot narrower because the sidewalk's planned to go from 4 feet to 5 feet.
Oh, sure.
And I think today it's actually right on the existing right-of-way. We try to move those off a little bit. So I think if you dive in here, we show it going from 10 to 8.5 as we slide it over toward the road just a little bit to give it a buffer from the actual property line.
So on the south side of the street, the amount of change is relatively minor. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Correct. It's essentially the same on the south.
Okay. And I appreciate the drawing of all the stuff that you see in the green space in the parking. And I appreciate that you got my 5-year-old to draw those lines. It was
Yeah.
great. The colorful lines that went all over. It was great. I'm going to assume that you all are working your tails off to minimize that green space as much as you possibly can. Because this is the guts of our city, right? We're talking whether it be conduit, whether it be water, whether it be sewer, whether it be electrical, everything that makes our city run infrastructurally, which may or may not be a word, is in, sorry, Brian, is in that green space, specifically on the north side, right? So when you all say you took it from 13 to 10, I'm assuming you're taking great care to make sure that our infrastructure that's under the ground that we don't see, that you couldn't just say, oh, we'll make it 7. It'll be fine. It won't be fine. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
So the guidance says if you go less than 5, you need a physical barrier.
Yeah.
It also says to maximize, but the point of reason of showing those utilities, if we slide over on top of utilities that are already there, we may need to relocate them, or we'll have their boxes in the trail itself, and then we may not have room to snow.
So it opens up a box of worms, can of worms, tender,
Yes.
box
So
of worms.
the
That's
10
not,
feet is approximately what's there.
okay. So I appreciate that. That's really was my main question. I know we have a lot of comments about sidewalk and probably roads from the group, but I really wanted to focus on that right-of-way / green space / parking in between. Because if that's where the guts of our city are, and we really just can't move those, that's really important to know. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Greg.
Can I ask
No.
one question on this slide before we move on?
No,
Okay.
just kidding.
Well, no, I just want to, can you explain the color coding, the orange and the blue?
Yeah, the orange is temporary construction easement, so the city would purchase a temporary easement there to help get us through construction. When we rebuild the road and the sidewalk, we're going to rebuild people's driveways, so we got to have the property rights to do so. So that goes away, that's temporary. The blue, and actually this is with the 13-foot trail offset, by the way. This is exactly the slide from the public meeting a month ago. So the blue on the north side will get a little smaller, but the blue is actual right-of-way the city would have to acquire to make this work.
Okay. So now we're at the part of the program where we find out who's for and who's against various things here. If you are against the trail, I'm just talking about the trail, I'm not talking about the road. If you are against the trail, please stand up.
I'm against the,
Oh, sorry, we do have people on, okay, so there's somebody online who's against the trail as well.
yes.
Is there anybody else online that's against the trail?
Star 6 to unmute yourself if you're online. Star 6, not pound 6, star 6. Many people have a problem with that. Okay, so,
I'm against the trail.
okay, so there's two people online against trail. Okay, please sit down if you're against the trail. If you're for the trail, please stand up if you are for the trail. Okay? Anybody online that is for the trail, please hit *6 to unmute yourself and let us know. Okay, you can sit down if you're for the trail. Okay, now I would like to know, I'd like to see people stand if you are, forget the trail. Forget the trail. If you are against the road project, just the road project, assume that instead of a trail, you have a sidewalk. Who's against the road project? Please stand up if you're against the road project.
Russ, can I question, are you talking about the 3-lane configuration?
Talking about the 3-lane configuration. Okay, so if you're standing right now, forget about the trail. You are against the road and the trail, basically. If you stood for the trail, you were against the trail and you're also against the road. So it doesn't matter whether there's a trail or not, you are against the road if you're standing. The 3-lane configuration.
Project as it is.
Yes.
As is, as is.
As it is.
As is.
I am not saying that I would be opposed to the road project in a different configuration.
Okay, but as is, you're against the configuration, as is.
As is, 3
Okay.
lanes.
Okay, you can sit down. You can sit down. Okay. Anybody here, I can't imagine this, because typically people that are for the road project probably don't come out. Anybody for the road project with the configuration as is? Okay? Okay?
Same period.
Okay. Handful of people there too. Everyone's all over the place. Okay, okay.
We got a question, Russ.
I'm sorry?
At some point in time, when the people are staying, would you ask them where they live? Or what- I mean, that's a big,
That'd be good.
Well, we're not going to go around the room and ask every single person where they,
you see what
Okay.
I'm saying?
okay, how many people here live directly on Ashworth? Please stand up.
I do.
Okay?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
People that stood up don't live on Ashworth.
That's
That are
what I was
for.
pointing
But we're
out.
still a part of the city.
Yeah.
Okay, if you live on Ashworth and you are for this project, sit down. If you live on Ashworth and you are against this project, please stay standing. Okay, I appreciate it. You guys can all sit down. Okay, I guess what I'm going to do is we're going to start with comments for people that are for the trail. Okay, for the trail. And I want to start out with somebody that I know has got to run here. Jim, are you here? Jim, come on up. You start us off. We're going to hear from people that are for the trail. Everybody for the trail is going to speak. You got 3 minutes. I'm going to time everybody. Please keep it as short and sweet as you can. After the 4 people, we're going to go to against the trail.
Jim Miller, 1390 South 88th Street. One thing that didn't show up in all the maps is there's been discussion about connecting over to Windsor Heights in Des Moines, crossing Walnut Creek with a pedestrian bridge. And if that is going to happen at some point, then it would sure help to have access to that area. So a trail along Ashworth would certainly help fill in the desert and give access to a connection that's going to be a very popular connection at some point. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, somebody else that's for the trail. And please, again, don't keep repeating.
Come on up.
Repeating. We're going to do 4, then we're going to do against.
I'm Steve Herwig. I live in West Des Moines. I also serve on the West Des Moines Bicycle Advisory Commission.
Steve, could you
And
give us your address, your specific address,
It's
please?
9225 Cascade Avenue.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Most of the schematics, when we went over this at the Bicycle Advisory Commission, show people on a 2-wheel bike. By necessity, I ride a recumbent bicycle. So I'm speaking for the people who use the shared common use path who ride other than a 2-wheeled bike. My bike is 31 inches wide, and on a 4-foot wide sidewalk, I can't encounter a pedestrian, person on a scooter, another person on a bike, or another person on a recumbent bicycle and not have to go off the path. So just for your consideration, for future reference, for any of the trail consideration, please consider those of us who, by necessity, and Ashworth, EP True Parkway, and Mills Parkway, believe me, they will never be roads that you'll see people on recumbents on. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve, appreciate it. Somebody else, anybody else who's for the trail?
Come on up.
Come on up. Coming up, give us your name and address for the record. And again, I'm asking people to try not to be repeating constantly what's already been said, so.
My name is Tom Suko, and I live at 4913 Westbrook Place, West Des Moines. And I am the chair of the Mayor's Bike Commission. Of course, I'm for the path, but I can see how it can't be the same from one end from First Street all the way to 50th. There's a whole lot of stuff goes along on those residences along on the north side of Ashworth there. And so people who think that what we saw tonight is going to be exactly what that's going to happen, I think that's not quite right?
No.
I mean, you got to design each section as it goes. And so we got to keep that in mind as well, that things will change. One section might not be exactly like you looked at it tonight, and it might be different than the section it's connected to, but we do need wider traffic routes for the pedestrians and bicyclists to both. And I don't see an explosion of bicyclists on this immediately because there's no place to go once you get to the First Street. You know, we got to build that bridge with Clive to get across the creek first. But it is vacant of any pathways up in there, that area. And so people in that area want to recreate with their bicycles and their families, and just walking need a better sidewalk than what's there now. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your service as well. Okay, somebody else that's for. Okay, come on up, give us your name and address for the record.
I'm Deanna Gray. I live at 1046 19th Street, which is about 2 houses north of Ashworth. My husband and I both walk and bike ride extensively. We walk on Ashworth almost every day, and we don't ride it. We ride bikes. He rides a trike, and I ride a regular bike. We can't ride anywhere near our home. We have to load our bikes up and haul them to a trail because you can't ride a trike on a sidewalk. It's too narrow. When I drive down Ashworth, I see, a beautiful street, but a good number of the yards have significant setback, probably 75 feet or more. And when I look at how the multi-use trail would fit into there, we're not really taking their yard, ripping it away. It's just changing a grassy area to a concrete area, so their view out from their home, in my opinion, would look similar. It would be grass. Now, some people have nice landscaping.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be respectful.
That they would have to move. But I see that the benefits of having a multi-use trail for people who ride bikes and walk would be substantial. And I would appreciate it moving forward.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. Okay. Heather.
Hi, Heather Schiebel. I'm the chair of the Parks Board. And I just wanted to bring up two things. Councilman McKinney, you'd mentioned that section on Ashworth that's just west of the interstate and how nice that looked. And if it would be like that, that would be great. I wasn't on the Parks Board at that time when that part went through, but that wasn't originally there. That was originally a sidewalk, and people were not happy about that at all. And it took about, I think, 10 years to get that done. Nobody's happy when these things happen. I grew up on 50th Street, and I lived there when it went from 2 lanes to 5 lanes, and my parents lost 23 feet of their yard. It sucked. Really did. It was terrible. For, like 7 years, their yard didn't look like they wanted because they lost a bunch of trees. But Their property value didn't go down. My parents re-landscaped. They were mad about it for a while, but it was okay. And I understand it's terrible when it's your property. And I just want everyone to know that we all feel for that. And you can see the city engineers doing everything they can to minimize the impact. And I can tell you from having gone through this, it wasn't my property, it was my parents' property, but the city came back with my dad, my dad's at CPA, so he got his own assessor. And they renegotiated and treated them with a great deal of respect. And my parents ended up happy with the project and their property value went up. So anyway, that's what I have to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Heather. Appreciate it. Thanks for your service. Okay, anybody else that's for? I think you've made as many meetings as I have in the last 12 years.
Haven't spoken a lot. Orion Nauman, 4900 Pleasant Street, Unit 6. Yeah, I was just thinking that there was a lot of comment about not riding on the sidewalk, and I would say even a regular bicyclist. As a regular bicyclist, I wouldn't ride on the sidewalk, especially on certain sections of Ashworth, mainly because with the curb cuts, you can easily get a ramp and then come down hard and ruin your bike. So I would end up in the street, and with 3 lanes, yeah, I'd be blocking traffic. And then with my experience with those 3 lanes, like 42nd Street, it tends to not be the best experience to bike on that. So just my opinion.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks for always attending these meetings. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay, anybody else for? Okay, before I go to against, is there anybody on the council here at this point in time that feels they can support the trail?
No?
Anybody? Okay. So I think everybody on the council probably feels the same way, and that is that, we do our best to try to have trails go throughout the city. We think it's an unbelievable amenity for our citizens, and our citizen survey shows that as well. And we are huge believers in quality of life amenities and what that does for the workforce, bringing people into the city, what it does for just pure quality of life, people getting out on the trails and enjoying it. I think we're all struggling here with, this is a difficult road. I know there are a bunch of people here against the road project. Something needs to happen on this road, in my opinion. This is unacceptable. I've driven down here several times. I, too, went out to the neighborhood, took a look at it. And, when I'm driving down there, there are times where I'm kind of looking away, praying to God that my mirror doesn't hit somebody else's mirror passing me. Something needs to happen here, okay? And as much as I would love to have a trail here, and as much as I want to address the perception that people have that live down here, that the people who live down here are the have-nots and the people out west are the haves, and this is part of the issue, I think, is giving more of these quality of life amenities. And now that, we're not doing that here, it's just not going to happen. And as important as it is, it's just, we've got to come up with something different. So, I've asked our engineers to try to come up with other alternatives to this. I'd like Brian Hemseth to maybe present what some other alternatives are. After he does that in a very brief manner, we're going to go out. I would ask that, you see we're not in favor of that trail. I think that sentiment has probably existed for a little bit. I would ask that we don't have person after person after person talking about how awful the trail is. We're not supportive of it. So, okay, Brian, other alternatives
Sure.
that we could potentially have here?
So out there today, there's 4-foot sidewalks. If you've ever walked down a 4-foot sidewalk with a companion, you know that it's a little tight. You're bumping elbows. It's not the most comfortable thing to be on. So in anticipation of this, we really thought it was important to, when we go back to put sidewalks back, that we put in 5-foot sidewalks. And it's not just for that. There's also, you have to put in passing spaces every 200 feet. And that's a requirement of Americans with Disabilities Act. We have to put those in. But so rather than doing that, let's look at putting in 5-foot sidewalks on both sides. So I'm seeing a lot of head nods. I'm assuming that's something that you'd like us to look at, and we'd be happy to do that. Now, there's one other thing that I wanted to bring up too.
Brian, can I ask a
Yeah,
question?
go.
Isn't that what was already proposed for the south side, was a 5-foot sidewalk?
Right.
Can I ask, are there any residents that would be opposed to a 5-foot sidewalk? Okay.
I live on the south side of Ashworth. I'm not opposed. It is a new idea. Sorry.
I'm sorry, just hold on a second. We'll get to that in a second here.
Yes, sir.
All right, go ahead, Brian.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
I mean, we're probably going to get out of here with a compromise of some sort, folks, and people are going to not be 100% happy, and they're not going to be 100% sad. That's how this goes. I wish we could always have a win-win situation every single time that we sit up here, and a lot of times we've been pretty successful. Not sure we're going to leave here with 100% happy and 100% sad. It's going to be a compromise.
So one of the things that I'd like to propose, and I've talked to the city manager about this as well, is instead of closing the door completely on a 10-foot wide multi-use trail, could we put in that 5-foot path, but we have to rebuild everybody's driveways as we're going through and beyond the right-of-way because of the differences in elevation. If we go in and build a 10-foot section of their driveway to match a future trail, it's not closing the door completely on a trail. Now, we wouldn't go after the right-of-way for the trail now. We wouldn't do any of that. But if you don't do it this way, it is completely closed. Future councils won't be, they can ask for it, but it's going to be a lot tougher for the folks that take over for me in the years to come to try to build that trail.
So it would be a 10 to 12 foot or 10 to 13
It would be.
right away plus then this 5-foot sidewalk now.
No.
Is that what you're saying?
No. Basically, your driveway is going to be, it's concrete. It's going to be, this section is going to be a 10-foot wide section of your driveway that will be 6-inch deep concrete with rebar. And then outside of that is, outside of that, where it's not your driveway,
So
you're going to have 5-foot sidewalks.
I don't want to say anything wrong in front of all you nice folks.
Existing would be existing right away.
Right, so the right-of-way would be the same, with the exception of, the south side near 19th Street and the north side near 22nd. Those turn lanes, those got to be there.
But Brian, why would we spend the money now? Because, I don't know, what do we have, 80 driveways through this area,
Okay,
I'm guessing?
I
Now, wait a minute, hang on.
Hold on.
Okay, if we got roughly 80 driveways, most of them, I think, are double-wide driveways, okay? Some of them maybe are triple. Some of them have 2 driveways, U-shapes, right? So when you take that times 6-inch concrete, you're talking a lot of money. And why would we spend that money now when it may never happen? I think that's just a total waste of money.
I respectfully disagree.
That's fine.
And it is, to do this, we are going back that far to replace the driveways anyway.
He's being asked to propose alternatives, that's what he's
Yeah, the incremental difference between the cost of pouring concrete, a majority of it is the labor. So you just put up a different size form and you put in a little bit more concrete, you put in rebar, the cost is inconsequential.
How many yards are we talking? Because your driveway approach is 6 inches. The driveways are 4 inches.
Right.
So if you take that past the sidewalk, which would, right now, so go another 6 feet, we'll say, of 6-inch concrete by a double-wide driveway, maybe 2 of them, how many yards are we talking? I mean, it's not It's not a minuscule amount. I'll disagree with that one.
It's not six figures, I will tell you that.
Well, I know that, but again, why would we spend money that we don't?
I'm looking at this and wiring your house for something that you may eventually do down the road. You may not, but it's smarter to wire it now for it and then do it later, if you're going to do it later, rather than not wire the house for it, because it's cheaper to do that when you're in there now.
Do what later?
If the trail ever happens, which it may never, it's just the increased cost is negligible to do this now if you're ever going to do it, rather than doing it later if you're ever going to do it.
Just to clarify, so if we set it up this way, then when and if a future city council were to decide that this trail should go in, we wouldn't have to disrupt anyone's driveways. We would just go from driveway to driveway and connect the dots, essentially.
Right.
Now, it's not.
And we're going to have to be in there anyway, regardless.
Right. I am not advocating for this because I am a huge trail fan and I do live just down the street. But, you know, whatever you tell me to do, I'm going to do. But what I'm telling you is this would be a very good use of city money, because if a future council ever asked for this in the future, the amount you would pay to fix everything, you would have to go back into people's driveways again, not just the 10-foot portion, but beyond. So
Gotcha.
It's looking forward.
So let me try to even sweeten the pot, Brian. I mean, is there any possible way we could move both? I mean, how is the alignment of the 5-foot sidewalk? How is that going to align with, let's say that we do this across people's driveways? How does that align? I mean, is it like this, or is the 5-foot sidewalk going to be like that?
The 5-foot sidewalk would be lined up with the portion of the trail portion of the driveway that's closest to the road.
So, okay, so it's going to be like this. Is it possible to move also, how many feet do we have there for us to gain by moving the sidewalk and this trail 2 feet?
We could, and we
closer to the road.
We've talked about that, but the downsides of that are getting into the utilities.
Okay.
And then narrowing up that right of way, having less snow storage. It's just not, it's not something that we would advise.
But I guess if we were going to do this, I think the council would have to move that trail and that sidewalk as close to that road as possible.
And that's something.
Even if we can gain a foot, that's
something we can look
significant.
So Brian, let me ask this question from another cost standpoint. You're going to put this 10-foot trail through the driveways.
Mm-hmm.
Who maintains that?
The property owner would be just like a regular driveway.
Yeah.
Thank you. So now when that driveway breaks, and it's not if, it when, all concrete breaks, okay? So if it starts to break up and they have to replace it, they themselves then have to pay more money to replace an extra 5 foot at 6 inches that's on their side of the right-of-way. That's not fair to the property owners.
Well, that driveway is going to last, 20, 30 years.
We don't know that. Concrete isn't like it used to be.
They don't make concrete like they used to.
They don't.
All right. Okay.
Essentially, we'd be building.
Let's go to the people that have been waiting here. Okay, people that are against the trail. Matter of fact, I don't care. You're against the trail, against the road. Come on up. Give us your name and address. People that are against something, come on up.
Against something.
Against concrete.
Yeah.
Rising concrete.
Jared Igo, 601 Ashworth Road. I come at this and speak to you as a cyclist. I'm an avid cyclist. I ride a couple thousand miles a year. I've done 13 rag rides in a row. Our family rides bikes. We've got an average of 3 bicycles per person in our house. So we love to ride.
Bike shop then, huh?
Pretty much, yes. I think and thank you for your time. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for taking a stand against this shared use path, because I feel it's a dangerous path to be constructed. As has been touched on, it crosses over 70 plus driveways, crosses through 23 significant street intersections throughout that entire space. If the traffic were to pick up, the cycle traffic were to pick up, and cyclists were to start using this as kind of the utilitarian route that it is, because it really doesn't go to any destination, the folks that would be riding on this are going to be doing 17, 18, 19 miles an hour, all by themselves on the flat. Now, when you get to a hill, they could be going 24, 25 miles an hour. And this completely ignores the fact that the e-bikes are growing exponentially in the market. There are predictions that in the coming year, there will be 1 million e-bikes sold throughout the United States. Those e-bikes allow anyone in this room to go 20 miles an hour with very little effort. Trek's website says that a typical e-bike can usually run between 16 and 24 miles an hour. Now, when you consider the impact and the folks that will be backing out of their driveways, pulling up on these side streets, those cyclists are covering 25 feet a second as they're approaching at 17 miles an hour. That gets to be really problematic for the folks that are pulling into their driveways, that are trying to make a left-hand turn to go north off of Ashworth, turn into their driveways. There's a lot of conflict that comes into that for those cyclists, and I feel it's very dangerous. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jerry.
Okay. Councilman Omar.
1026 31st Street. I'm one house off of Ashworth. I go down Ashworth. I've gone down Ashworth since it was 2 lanes all the way out to State Farm Road, which is 50th Street. So I'm pretty familiar with the area out there. And I guess I just don't think that the 3-lane road is a good idea. I think you could take 4 feet on each side of the right-of-way, and you'd have 4 11-foot lanes, 2 lanes going each way, 11 foot. And if you wanted to take 3 foot off of each side, you'd still have 10.5-foot lanes. And you'd still have 7 foot on the south half and 6.5 on the north between the sidewalk and the street. The problem I have with the turn lane on a 5-lane works great. On 3-lane, I don't think it works, especially if you look at 22nd, for example. If you're going south on 22nd and come to Ashworth, you're taking your kid to school at Fair Meadows. You've got a queue of maybe 2-3 cars there if they've got to wait. Now all the parents who've dropped their kids off who want to get on 235 to go downtown, okay, where do they go? You got 3 in the queue. They come out, they want to go down 22nd to the north. There's no way they can get there. The other cars are sitting there to go south. So how does that work? It doesn't work. There's no way that can work, okay? You go down to, okay, and then go down to 19th Street. Most of the people, okay, who get off on 22nd Street and want to go south have to go east to 19th Street to go south. It's signalized, okay? If you've got just 1 lane going east, somebody who wants to continue to go east stops there. All the people who want to go south, who can turn right on red, no longer can do that. So you back up the traffic there. That's where they're going. That's what they got to do. They got to get off 22nd, and if they want to go south, they got to go down to 19th to go on down to Grand Avenue, okay? So you can make, with the 4 lanes, the eastbound traffic could continue to go east, and the southbound traffic can turn right on red, and the traffic flows a lot easier than if you have the turn lane there. It just doesn't work. The eastbound clogs up that whole lane, backs it up. The argument on, I go down there today, and cars are still going side by side. They may be spaced a little bit. They go a lot slower than they probably would if they had a wider lane. But I just think instead of everybody bumper to bumper, okay, that's going east, they're spread out in 2 different lanes. I think the capacity and the movement would be easier than just the 1 lane and the turn lane. So I just think if you, and you're not, you don't have to acquire any.
Wrap it up, Ted. You gotta
Okay,
wrap it
you
up.
don't have to acquire any additional right-of-way. Leave the sidewalk where it is. Take 3 feet or 4 feet off of each side. Put it in there so you've got lanes that are either 10.5 or 11 feet rather than the 9. And people should feel more comfortable than they do right now.
All right.
So that would be my
Thank you.
suggestion.
Thanks,
Thank you, Ted, appreciate it. Brian, I do want you to address some of those that were just, some of the comments that were just made before we have the next speaker about the width of the lanes and whatnot, if you can. I mean, can we have, I don't want you to address the trail comment. We're not supportive of the trail, but the width of the lanes and whatnot. We've asked you to look at that. We've asked 9 foot, 10 foot, 11 foot, different things.
Yeah, I wasn't completely following everything there, but what we have for 19th to 23rd will work. We've modeled it. We've got turn lanes to handle those southbound turners. We've got turn lanes going for people going westbound that need to go northbound. That through lane's going to be
So traffic is going to flow. Is there any difference in the width of the lanes that we can do that makes sense or anything like that? Can we do 10.5 foot lanes, 3 10.5 foot lanes? Can we do 11 foot lane?
Just a couple of things. As I spoke about earlier, there's so many things, the snow, the rain, that effectively will narrow your road up immediately when that starts happening. The second thing is we did a little research on crashes, because I know that folks have asked us about crashes on Ashworth, and the lane departure crashes on Ashworth, we compared those to lane departure crashes on EP True, which has 4 12-foot lanes. And then actually EP True has a little bit more traffic. We looked at the section from where the S-curve, as it goes across the railroad tracks, all the way over to 50th Street, and there is 4 times more lane departure crashes on Ashworth in the same time period that there is on EP True Parkway. So to take our, if we go with a 3-lane cross section and we go even narrower, that's not something that the engineering department and our consultant can support.
Is there a better, safer configuration? I mean, we know we can't do 5 lanes here.
No, if you want to keep the configuration in the lane in the confines of what's out there today, the 3-lane cross section, hands down the best situation.
With a couple right turn lanes.
Correct, at 19th
right.
and 27th.
Brian, address.
Let's get the next against person.
But I want to follow up Ted's comment about Ashworth, the 22nd and 23rd, people coming and going from Fair Meadows. He brings up a valid point. I drop off my kid, hypothetically, at Fair Meadows, and I'm going down to 22nd Street to get on the freeway. I'm in that left turn lane to go to 22nd. Somebody else is coming from 22nd to Fair Meadows. They're in that left turn lane to go south on 23rd. How's that work?
No, you can't.
Come on up if you want to speak. Hold on, please don't yell stuff out. We're not going to get into that.
Okay, I
Sorry.
guess you're right. I didn't see that you've built an island there, so you can't turn down.
Correct.
That's another screwed up incident.
Okay, the next person would like to speak. Go ahead, you've been waiting patiently. Come on up.
Brad Morford, 1815 Ashworth Road. Going to touch on a couple things first. First of all, if you guys decide to can that bike path, don't feel bad. Don't beat yourself up. The people that live on Ashworth Road because that's what we want to live. That's our neighborhood. I lived at 60th and Coachlight for 20 years. I had a 10-foot wide bike path. It was awesome. but I moved to Ashworth, to that neighborhood, and I love that neighborhood, and it's that neighborhood feel, why we are all there. If we wanted to be out west, we could move out west. Please keep our neighborhood like it is. You just had an hour and a half about Valley Junction. It's going to be the same thing. In regards to building the driveway to accommodate the 10-foot path, so what you're telling me is I should keep all those signs, is that right? Because they will go up, and I apologize.
Address the council.
Okay. But those signs can be stored, because that's what's going to happen again if we try to do that. We do not want that. I've gone door to door for probably 10 nights, and I have talked to 51 households out of the 90 houses that are on Ashworth Road. 51 out of 90. I couldn't get hold of the others, but I tell you, there were 3 people that were in favor of the bike path. One was moving, one rented, and as he told me, I don't give a damn what the city does, and another person was totally uninformed. 100% of every one of those people signed my form and said they were against the bike path. And I would go and get the rest of them. I love to bike, I love to do it. But I don't think people also realize, and I had a PowerPoint presentation because I was told I could give one, but I guess I was told I can't now. But there are 108 mature trees which are going to be cut down to do this. There are 71 telephone poles that need to get moved. There are 12 street signs that need to get moved, and countless other landscaping and projects to people. So I ask you to just, please, if you can say you're not going to do that, I am concerned with what the setback is going to be. On original plans that I've got here, it was 12. I don't know where the 13 came from, but if they go back to what my original setback is, then they can have another feet to make 5 foot. I'm good with that.
Brad, I got a question.
Thank you very much.
Who told you you can't give a PowerPoint? Because it was my understanding that the reason for a workshop is to gather information for us to make a educated decision based on the information. If he's got a PowerPoint and isn't prepared or isn't allowed to give it, then we're not getting the information that maybe we should.
It's whatever. But
Kevin,
I understand it's 9 o'clock and nobody wants to be here till midnight like we were 3 weeks ago, but
I think
again,
Brad is making a very effective point without a PowerPoint.
I will also say there are just as many statistics that you can find that say narrow lanes are safer in a 35 mile an hour and below that is wide. People tend to go faster on wider lanes than they do on narrow ones. And you can find just as much stuff in that green book that says one way as another. It just depends on where you really want to line your thought process.
All right. Thank you, Brad. I appreciate it.
I have one question for Brad really quick. Brad, we had emailed back and forth and chatted a little bit.
Yep.
So other than the 3, it was 100% opposed to the trail, which we're not moving forward with. Did you get a sense of the road?
The 3-lane to road,
Yes.
it's about 60% in favor, 40% not, because
You've spoken with so many people.
for each question.
All right, thank you so much for sharing that.
Appreciate that. Appreciate it, Brad. Okay. Anybody else anti that would like to speak, come on up. Give us your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Jose Viteri. I live on 3115 Ashworth. First off, I want to thank Brian for being such an amazing listener. He and I talked once, and I gotta say, besides my personal opinions on this matter, I think we are lucky to have a good engineer. And Nick Hardesty, we're going to run into each other again. We met before, and I promise you this is not personal. So that's one thing. Second, I had a number of kids. I have a number of kids, and they play in my property. Front yard, backyard, you name it. We bought the house with the assumed risk of the location, you bet. However, this bike path, I appreciate you guys' current opinion, and I hope it stays that way. What it would do, it would increase enormously the non-motorized traffic in front of my house, and in front of everybody else's house. And there's a number of people here with small children that play in the property. Now, the world is changing. There's a lot of people out there that are not trustworthy, and to give them very slow path, to give them access to my property, to the front of my property, see where I live and where my kids are. I really don't feel comfortable with that. I bought the house with assumed risk as it is, not with added risk that this bike will propose. That's one thing. Another thing is, like, if I want a bike, I have a lot of bikers in my house. I probably own like 13 bicycles among all my kids. I have 8 kids, my wife and I have a bike. We load up the bikes and we take them to a trail, to bike to a trail that is adequate, a trail that is, well, there's no driveways, there's no intersections. We go to Clive, we go to Waukee, we go to Des Moines proper. We go to proper bikes to bike recreationally, so that we don't have to assume the risks of running into driveways or people backing into us and backing into my children. When you bike that many kids, you have many feet of bikers that you have to yell at. And I promise you, my voice can only get so loud to get to the front. I have to give instructions very clear on the way I do this. I have a very good system, but it doesn't include driving through these many driveways and crossing these many streets. So again, I appreciate you guys listening to us, and I really appreciate you guys' consideration to everything we've said. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you.
Who's next? Come on up. Okay, come on up. Give us your name and address for the record, please.
Shane McClinton, 1910 Ashworth Road. First, just thanks for all the work you guys have put in. I do appreciate the extra attention to some of the concerns I brought up, so I really appreciate that. One of the big concerns I think that I still have, I guess, is, and you stated very clearly, the concern with the 3-lane, I guess. And I think some of what I had suggested has been construed a little bit. I think the narrow lane thing applies to a 4-lane configuration, not a 3-lane. So having 3 narrow lanes is not kind of what I'm suggesting, but I didn't see a 4 narrow lane configuration considered, which seems to potentially be a good solution in this case. And again, many of the points have already been stated. I won't restate those. But I do want to come back to some of the statistics that were reported. So the safety concern going to a 3-lane was mentioned of a study that showed a reduced risk. Interesting thing about that study was, if you look into the details, just like my study was critiqued, which is good, in this study too, it was mainly on U.S. local roads. So I'm from Storm Lake, Iowa. Highway 7 comes into the road. That's what they converted from 4 lanes to 3 lanes. The majority of the studies that showed a reduced risk came from places in small towns like that of U.S. highways going into a road. Those studies have not been done in roads like Ashworth Road. So do we really know that a 3-lane conversion is going to work, and that some of the other concerns brought up are not going to have issues? I'm concerned about all the traffic congestion too. I can't imagine how I'm going to get out on 19th Road, or sorry, on Ashworth Road from where I live right now. There is going to be a continuous flow of traffic from 22nd to 19th. People are going to want to shoot those gaps and run a greater risk of having accidents, and that risk is going to be much greater than some of the other concerns that are brought up. So I think there are some safety considerations not being considered that would weigh against this conversion with a 3-lane. There are some things about the 3-lane that are appealing, but there's also a lot of things that I am concerned about that as well. From that study as well too, there was another road in Des Moines. So there were 2 roads in Des Moines that were converted. One of the roads that was converted, they converted back to a 4-lane because it didn't work. So do we know that this is going to work? Because if we do this, we're not widening this. We can't go back to 4-lane once we do this, because you're not going to convert it back to 9-foot widths, which I agree is too narrow. So if we decide to go with 3-lane, we have to be confident that it works, because if it doesn't, there's no way out. There's no way to go back, and there's too many examples. There's another example that I learned of today too, which was mentioned of another road that they converted to 3 lanes and regretted it and had to convert it and spend millions of dollars to convert it back to 4 lanes. So I would please assure that we do thorough investigation to make sure this is going to work and not apply a study that shows reduced risk on a road that is not like Ashworth Road. Okay, we need to study within the specific context of this.
You have 10 seconds left.
Okay, those are the main points. So the lane width applies to the other consideration, but that is to come after this decision.
I appreciate that. Brian, if you could just be maybe taking note, writing this down, instead of having you come up after each time, maybe you can come up and you can talk about, address some of these things that have been brought up afterwards. Okay. Okay. Come on up. Let's do this. Anybody that wants to speak, why don't you make a line over here, please, so we can see how many people want to speak. Anybody that wants to speak, make a line over here. Anybody else?
Good to see you too.
Phone calls included.
Phone calls, I'm going to go to phone calls right after we hit everybody in the chamber.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm Eric Bush. I live at 3901 Ashworth Road. Built in 1886. As far as I know, it's the oldest house in all of West Des Moines. I'm going to talk about the trail. There's a big gap of where trails aren't in West Des Moines. Guess what? That's the oldest part. You cannot compare Ashworth Road to E.P. True Parkway. E.P. True Parkway, starting at Westridge, the only driveways are big communities.
Keep in mind, we are not in favor of the trail.
All right.
So if you have road comments, you might want to go there.
All right,
because
let's
you're
go
not
with road.
convincing us any more than
Safety.
we've already been
There's two reasons.
convinced.
Safety.
Okay.
Studies show, empirical data show that those 9-foot, 10-foot width roads reduce speed. I live at 39th and Ashworth. Your chart even showed that's where the most accidents are. Here's the thing, inexperienced drivers, all right? That's what's happening. 8 o'clock in the morning, 3:30 in the afternoon, all right? One hand on a cell phone, the other trying to turn. When you go to 3 lanes, empirical data, true data, says they're going faster.
What empirical data do you have? Could you cite the source so we know what
I
that
will
is?
cite the same source that Shane had in his email to you.
Beautiful.
Right?
Go ahead.
You have that. Going fast, if you've ever been on Douglas, they do that 3. It's infuriating if you get someone that's going 30 miles an hour in a 35. When they finally turn over left to go into a left turn lane, those people are going to zoom and try to get through yellow lights. You're going to have more accidents at intersections. I don't think that the current 4-lane situation, people aren't having accidents in the lanes before they get to the intersections. It's the intersections that are the problem, and it's because of inexperienced drivers on 39th and 35th, all kids. Talk about 50th Street. Those are little bitty kids crossing the road there, right? Those are grade school kids coming from Crossroads. You need to keep that speed down. It's an old area. You want to solve the trail problem, you build something to get over 63rd. You can lie with stats. People want better access. You know what? They want access to get across 63rd. That's the problem. Then they can get on the trail, go all the way to Grays Lake and go to all the other trails. 63rd is the problem. Build a tunnel under it, build a bridge over it. That'll solve your trail problem. And we already have enough trails. Let's save the money. Let's save $50 million. $50 million is what it was going to cost. That's your budget. How many of you government folks think $50 million will really be on budget? Any taxpayers? How many think it'll be closer to $100 million? $100 million for something that you don't need. We need to keep the speed down there. So it's money and it's safety.
Appreciate it, Eric. Thanks so much. Okay. Next, give us your name and address for the record, please.
Jennifer Igo, I live at 601 Ashworth Road. I just have a couple comments, mostly piggybacking on other people's comments. The first one is the speed. Living at 6th and Ashworth, we see cars fly down to 63rd Street. It is incredible. So widening those streets is a concern to give them more space. They feel like they've got more room to do the speeding. I think that the 3-lane widening is not the answer either. Of course, being at 6th and Ashworth, we do see a lot of times the overflow from the interstate. When there's an accident on the interstate and it slows traffic to downtown, people are getting off at 22nd Street, getting off at 8th Street, and it will oftentimes be bumper to bumper, both lanes heading east on Ashworth. So moving that now to a 1-lane, our residents can't get off onto Ashworth, and the traffic then only goes to a 1-lane. So I do think that's a concern. One more point then is with regards to the setback. I think we really need to evaluate that distance. Today in front of my house, that setback is about 8.5 feet. Moving that to 12 feet is a concern because the research has shown that the drivers are not looking past 5 or 6 feet to the right of them. And so if there is a walker walking on the sidewalk that is 12 feet set back off of the road, that driver is not actually looking at that sidewalk or a walker that's going to cross a side street. So I think it is a concern that that setback is too far for that sidewalk, then that would be put in. So just some comments. Those are the 3 issues.
Thank you so much. Okay, come on up, name and address for the record, please.
Earl Weisenhorn, 1527 Ashworth Road. First of all, very encouraged to see that we had no positive votes on the city council tonight as regards the multi-use pathway. Made me feel like there was a chance that our voices would be heard. Did a quick head count when you asked people to stand up for and against. Out of roughly 85 people here, 85% of the people that stood were against. Roughly 15% were for. So that tells me that the city council, from what you show here tonight, are more in line with the majority of the people, which is how government should run. I won't make any comments on 3-lane, 4-lane, and the road improvements. I've got my own thoughts, but I'm going to reserve those for now. Given what I said about the council apparently being against the multi-use pathway, I do want to bring a couple of points to the fore that I think weren't adequately addressed, or questions weren't adequately, at least adequately answered from my point of view.
Brian, take note. He's listening.
Okay. Number one, from the beginning, the concept, we were told that the reason for the multi-use pathway was to connect to existing trails, and yet it doesn't do that on either end, which was pointed out by other people. So I think that's valid. Number two, when they were talking about building this bike path, were there consultations with Polk County and the people in Polk County that maintain the bike paths for the rest of the county, and how this would interface with it? Didn't look to me like that happened. When any new concrete that gets poured, whether for the bike path or for the street, I'd like to see the city use water permeable concrete. It's a new concept, been very successfully introduced in a number of communities. That would mitigate additional runoff if a larger sidewalk, even going to a 5-foot sidewalk on both sides of Ashworth, if it's a water permeable concrete, we've got less runoff during rain times. I know snow's going to pile up, but even that, you're going to have some soaking through the concrete, which should mitigate the need for enhancing or expanding the existing water sewer runoff capacity.
You have about 30 seconds. So I want to make sure you get it all in. You got about 30 seconds.
Thank you.
Yep.
One of the other major points made by one of the presenters earlier was that it's been shown that bike paths, when they're introduced to a community, increase property values. My question is that for bike paths that run in front of properties or behind them? I can see it increasing property values if it runs behind the house, but not in the front. The last thing I'll say is if they do introduce the bike path, are we going to be compensated for that, or is it just going to be an easement? Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. I would just say, with all due respect, Polk County does not maintain our bike paths. We do. And the permeable surface on the bike paths, I would tell you as well, that'd be great, but it's extremely expensive. So, but thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. Melissa.
Hi, Melissa Walker-Gobin, 704 Ashworth Road. Been a resident since 2004, since most of you, I believe, were even before you were in office. So, and good to see Ted. I think he left. But I'm here concerned about the south side, and I promise not to talk about the trail. Thank you. But we live in that neighborhood because of its character. And we live in a great community where we have new and we have old. So I appreciate you respecting the old character of that. You talked, Russ, about the haves and the have-nots. I don't think it's an issue of people wanting that trail, but there are lots of things that could be done in this area of town. I mean, we've got old sewer lines probably into our homes, possibly lead service lines for the water. You know, could there be loan programs for residents to tap into some money to help pay for some of those things? Those things maybe that could help the older area of the community. Also, south side. if we could get some clarification on the right-of-way that's being asked for this project. Because 8th East, those yards are significantly smaller in the front than the area that you're talking about right now. I know we're very concerned about this area, but once you get going on something, you're not going to want to stop. And you're going to keep going. And so we need to know, how much are you asking for us in those right-of-ways, because they're small now. And the sidewalk, yeah, 4 feet, and even adding just a foot back, I know that's probably going to take out my retaining wall, my neighbor's retaining wall. And so, landscaping that's been there, and I know that's not, the greater good of the community, but it means a lot to the people who've lived there for a long time and have put all those things in for years and years. So we need to know, is the right-of-way something that has to be consistent all across the board? Because we have narrow ones now. And the sidewalk, I'm fine with a nice new sidewalk that the city pays for, but is that going to come into the yard more because the right-of-way is so narrow? So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Okay, next, for the people online, we've got one more person after this resident, and then we will go online.
I'm Dennis Ballou, and my wife Beverly Ballou of 1905 Ashworth Road. And as far as the haves, have-nots, I consider us to be have-nots that we're very fortunate. We're hardworking, blue collar. I'm a pipe tradesman, and my wife is a small business owner, a cosmetologist, and we worked very hard to be able to purchase the property that we have at 1905 Ashworth in a beautiful area that's established. They have 6 points. I'd like to say that, number one, the original intent of the design of the area, the neighborhood in which we have purchased, which is part of this corridor that you're looking at least from 22nd back to 1st Street. It was not intended to have bike trails put in it. It was laid out with the different parks and amenities that were put into this area. Of course, the Ballard Ballroom is one of those. It was not intended to have 10-foot wide bike trails running through the neighborhood. And number two, where's the study of an actual impact of the number of cyclists and other users that are going to be traversing up and down this corridor? We have bikers that like to hop bars and run through the bars through town till 2 a.m., 3 a.m. We see them on the streets sometime. I certainly don't want them in my front yard, 100 at a crack, traveling at 2 a.m. Point three, of the increased traffic, how many of those potential criminals, as was referred to by one of our other neighbors, possibly pedophiles, and may increase the chances of another Johnny Geish or human trafficking incident that could happen with some of our children and grandchildren in the area. Point four, at 25 miles per hour, they are traveling at 36.67 feet per second. So do the math on that, how long that takes to get someone behind you trying to back out of your driveway. Point five, I believe the fourth lane is not needed at the T intersections to make your right-hand turn. You can simply use repainting or adding curbing or a combination of the two, because you don't need a left turn lane to pull into someone's driveway on the other side. You only need to get to the right. So shifting the lanes using the 3 lanes that you're talking about, one each direction, and one to turn right at that point there.
You
That's
got
at
20
several
seconds
T
left.
intersections. What?
You got 20 seconds left.
As far as the storm gutters, the street, the way that the water runs off of the street, you have to be maintaining a crown in the roadway, which has been taken out over time by grinding off the street and putting in asphalt. So that has directly affected the way the water flows off the street at the curb gutters at this time. And when you put in whatever new paving that comes back in, we need to make sure that the crown is in the road and that the water gets ran to the gutters and gets off the roadway.
Okay, thank you so much for your comments.
I've never seen a foot and a half of snow left from the curb out on Ashworth Road in the time I've lived here since 1986 in this area.
Okay, Thank you so
Okay.
much. I appreciate your comments. Okay, MJ, you're the last one in the chamber, and then we're going to go online.
All right, MJ Hogue, 413 2nd Street. So, fun fact, the nickname for the center turning lanes is a suicide lane, because cars come in both directions, which is, I think that's a fun little fact.
MJ, give us your name and address again for the record.
MJ Hogue, 413 2nd Street.
Gotcha, go ahead.
So, my issues with the road design, you've heard me talk about it before, would be those turning radii. I'd like to see smaller ones there. But mostly what I got up here to talk about is, we've heard people talk about, will a 3-lane configuration work? How wide do the lanes need to be? Well, the beautiful thing here is we already have a road, which means for the price of paint and reconfiguring a few stoplights, you can show that it works. And you can show that it works in whatever lane width you want, because we already have the roadway. So by being willing to experiment and spend a little money and staff time on restriping the road, we can show residents that it works on Ashworth. So I would suggest doing that. Thank you.
Thanks, MJ, appreciate it. Okay, we're going to go online. Anybody online that would like to address the council on this issue, please hit *6, not #6, *6, unmute yourself, and give us your name and address for the record, and please keep it to 3 minutes or less.
Aaron Sewell. I live at 931 31st Street, the south side of Ashworth. I am the vice chair of the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, but the trail question's out the window, so never mind on that. But I will say that my wife, my 3-year-old daughter, we've walked up and down the sidewalks of Ashworth many times. My wife does it almost daily. We've seen, I love to go out in my backyard. My driveway's on 31st. My backyard looks right into Ashworth. I love to watch people just walking by. We wave, and my dog goes crazy and barks at them. But it's, just thinking, we've never thought about any concerns of cars passing by. Safety-wise, no fears, no worries. I love that the city is always trying to keep that, be mindful of safety, and I haven't read any of the data for or against it myself. So I appreciate some of the things I learned, and I better understand the perspectives staff is coming from, and I appreciate the perspectives they're coming from. But just speaking from my own experience, I was at the beginning for the project, like 51% for, and then as I continued to just watch and think and observe and learn about the project, I just kind of kept realizing or thinking, I don't think this is an entirely necessary project, which is where I ended up switching to be against the project. And I think I'm the only person on the Parks Board who was against the project, because even though I feel like it has great potential, I never saw the absolute need for it. Thinking about the Fair Meadows, the first time hearing that, I believe it sounds like the not possible to turn left coming from that road, and I could be wrong in what I heard. There's a lot of conversation. That's new information. That's interesting to me. I'm just thoughtful. And then the idea of the 5-foot sidewalks is new information, which I understand you've directed them to look into that possibility, and I'm interested in that. It seems like a plausible idea for south and north sides. So I do want to just end with, I appreciate all the hard work the staff does, continuing to look at data, and the city does. I appreciate you guys just being receptive of us as citizens, and understand you have to look out for the whole city and people coming through. So I appreciate you zooming in and giving us an opportunity to provide our own perspectives to add to these hard decisions you have to make. And I know that you'll continue to do that and continue to have a conversation. So thank you all.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks for your service as well. Appreciate it. Okay, anybody else online, hit *6 to unmute yourself. Give us your name and address for the record. Please keep it to 3 minutes or under.
Hello, this is Lori Young.
Hey, Lori, go ahead.
I live at 2000 Ashworth, so exactly where all this is taking place. So my concern with the 3 lanes is that y'all have added basically the ability to use 19th through 22nd as a raceway for people to cut through neighborhoods. And that will destroy the neighborhoods that we have already. If you look at those right turn lanes that y'all have added to it, and you look at 2000 Ashworth on your map, they will affect both of our driveways. Those people are going to be rushing down, and there is no way we're going to be able to get out of our driveway during those times. And we have a lot of cut-through traffic already that makes that road dangerous. It's not the neighbors that make it dangerous. It's the people who are trying to save 5 minutes getting home from work. Or there's been an accident on the freeway, so they're going to cut down and they're going to come through our neighborhood, which is fine. I get it. I've cut through neighborhoods too. But by adding the wider lanes, we're going to increase the speed. I realize we need to do that, so I can live with that. But by adding those right turn lanes, you're making that little part from 19th to 22nd Street a friggin' raceway that endangers our kids and our grandkids. Kids walk home from, I know that y'all tried hard, but Fair Meadows is a big deal, and there's a lot of traffic from that. And if you come by, y'all say y'all been down Ashworth to look at this. If you look at my front yard, you would know it because the speed is increasing on Ashworth right now. And we have an entire width of about a foot of our yard that's already been taken over by the traffic and the trucks that are working at Fair Meadows and the city and that stupid cable stuff that y'all put in there. Y'all put it right there where y'all want to now dig it up again. Makes no sense at all. But anyway, we have water that's red from the rust. West Des Moines Water will not fix our water till y'all decide to do with this roadway. It's holding us up. So the guy that I had the idea of let's stripe it and see how it works. Isn't that the cheapest way of looking at this?
You got 30
But
seconds.
adding those right turn lanes, adding those right turn lanes is going to make it a raceway, a cut through. And if you'll go and count the cigarette butts that are in front of my driveway from the people that are cutting through the neighborhood, it's just cut through, folks. And if you make it a raceway, you're going to endanger more lives.
Okay, appreciate it. Now, you're talking about the cut through being 22nd Street?
No,
19th?
that extra right turn lane. People are going to dive down right in front of our house to try to get to that right turn as fast as possible. And our house and the houses that are two down that have driveways facing out that way, they're not going to be able to get out of their driveways. We're going to be stuck in our driveways.
Okay, thank you so much.
And if you've lived in a bigger town, it's true. I'm sorry, but it's true because I've lived through this before in another town.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, anybody else online that would like to address the council, please hit *6, unmute yourself, and give us your name and address for the record. Anybody else online that would like to address the council? *6 to unmute yourself. Okay, that's it. At this time, I guess, Brian, I'd have you come up here, and I've got, I guess, a question for you, and that is, you know, you're a city engineer. You know the safest design for roads. What is the safest design of a road that we could possibly have here if we didn't care about right-of-way at all? 5-lane with a turn lane in the middle?
No, I don't think so.
4-lane with wider lanes, more narrow lanes? What is the safest road design that is efficient at moving cars, as efficient as moving cars as possible? What is the best, most safe, most efficient road design possible?
I believe after all the work that we've done, after the study we did with H.R. Green long ago, but what you see right here, we've pulled this back. We looked at 5 lanes the whole way. We looked at 4 lanes with 12-foot lanes the whole way. I believe that this is going to move traffic efficiently, but it's also going to be something where with 3 lanes, it's going to make it more of a neighborhood feel versus a 4-lane road. And I don't believe you're going to have all the speeding issues that you may think you're going to have on this road.
What about people trying to dart in to get into the road because there's no brake, there's no string at all?
Yeah, and that's something that Kevin and I talked about. I'm sorry, Councilman Trevilian and I talked about. Apologize, I've known him for a very long time, and just.
When I took office, I'm still the same person I was before, so whatever. I'm fine with that.
So this guy and me, we sat and we talked about the that very thing. And we looked at the traffic modeling, and Eric's got a feature where you can look at, and it models the traffic, very accurately. And we were looking at gaps and how you would get through, and like where different places where you're at in the driveways. And I don't know if you remember when we did that, but there's even, and we were looking at it during peak hour. So we believe that people will be able to get out of their driveways in all locations, even between 19th and 22nd.
Brian, this is all residential, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so they've all got, I don't know, Monday, Tuesday garbage collection.
Mm-hmm.
Where's that garbage truck sit? In that east or westbound turn lane, right? Because it's a one-lane road.
Yep.
How do I get around that garbage truck?
You'd have to
because it's illegal to drive. Officer, correct me if I'm wrong. I think he's still back there. It's illegal to drive in a turn lane.
Yeah.
How do I get around that garbage truck? Or the Amazon truck, or UPS, or a city bus, whatever?
Right.
How do I?
So if you pass them now, you're going to be in the opposing. You're going to be in the opposing lane. That's not true. Look at all of the pictures that we took. You can't get around a bus that's stopped in a 9-foot lane and not be able to, and not go into the other lane of traffic.
Okay, so let's take the illegal part out of it. If there's a car coming east and I'm going west and I'm behind the garbage truck and they're wanting to turn left, now where do I go?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
If I'm going west,
yes,
and there's a garbage truck,
right,
and there's somebody coming east wanting to turn left,
you wait.
How do I get?
You wait behind the garbage truck until that garbage truck gets out of the way. These are all things that I live on 50th Street, very busy street.
Sir, hold on a second. We'll get to you in a second. Nobody shout stuff out from the audience. We'll get to you in a second.
I live on 50th Street and it's very busy. And I will tell you that they don't pick up my garbage during peak hour. They know to go into the neighborhoods and pick up the garbage during the peak hour because they're out there at 6 a.m. I can hear them.
Brian, you live on a 5-lane road. I believe.
know. I understand that.
Okay.
I understand that. But what I'm saying is Brett and I can work with the garbage collection service to get them out there at times when there's very little traffic.
2 o'clock in the morning.
Kevin,
I'm just asking.
Come on, no.
I don't. Ashworth carries traffic all day long.
Brian. I know, and I walk. I've been walking Ashworth way more in the last month just so I could observe it. And I'm out there at 6 o'clock in the morning taking walks, taking my dog for a walk, and there is not that much traffic at 6 a.m. I go for a walk. I bet you I walk all the way around there. I see very few cars at that time of day.
Brian,
there's ways that we can work around this, Kevin.
Sir, come on and get up here and go ahead and give us whatever point you have, please. Give us your name and address for the record, though, first.
Del Christensen, 932 32nd Street.
Okay.
We're right on the corner of 32nd and Ashworth. And what Brian is talking about, we have, right now, have a long wait sometimes getting out on Ashworth. 6 o'clock in the morning, no, there isn't much traffic on Ashworth. 7:30 to 9 o'clock, I mean, it is steady, and they are moving along at a high rate of speed. And as far as the 3-lane roads, Brian didn't look back far enough. I grew up with 3-lane highways. Back in the late 30s and the 40s, they made 3-lane highways. 2 lanes, one going each direction for the traffic. The center lane was a turn lane. It was a suicide lane, that's what they called it. And you're going to have the same thing with the turn lane. People are going to use that for a passing lane because they run out of patience. And we see them road rage going by our house there on Ashworth. So you know they're going to be using the turn lane for a passing lane. And if you got one coming from each direction, you got a hazard happening. And as far as changing it to a 3-lane from a 4-lane, putting in that bike path, what are you going to do if that 3-lane don't work out? You are stuck, or it'll be multi-million-dollar, changing it back to a 4-lane. And as the area grows, you're going to have more traffic. They just widened the bridge on Ashworth over 35 out in Waukee. So, that alone is putting more traffic on Ashworth. So, to me, it's absolutely the wrong way to go. And the modern, looking back, I don't know how far Brian looked back, but you need to look back at when the 3 lanes were a popular road. I drove on them. They were very dangerous.
We've got some in our city right now. So we've looked at those. But okay,
anyway,
well, thank you so much for your
thank you.
comments. I really appreciate it. Okay, Brian, question.
Yeah, a couple more things I want to
come on
address
up.
of questions that people came up and asked. There was a question, I can't remember who asked, but it was about right-of-way. And like without the trail now, the only right-of-way we need to buy, aside from maybe some temporary construction easements so we have room to work, is the area on from basically 23rd to 19th Street because of the turn lanes. Those are the only areas where we would need permanent right-of-way takings.
Okay.
So, would we have to get into retaining walls? Yeah, it was you. Would we have to get into retaining walls? We wouldn't have to get into retaining walls. The 5-foot would not go back into their property. It would go towards the street. And if we go with a 11-foot wide lane that folks are asking for, I did some math, and that only leaves you with about 4.5 feet between your back of your curb and your sidewalk, and that is way less than what it is now. And I will assure you that shoveling snow and I like I said, I live on 50th, and those plows can push snow back pretty far. And no offense to Brett, but I have to shovel the snow off of the road, off of my sidewalk. But if it's 4.5 feet, or like it would be if we did 4 11-foot lanes, which I'm not condoning because I don't think it's safer, and I think people will drive faster on a road like that. I don't think it's a good idea. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
That was the next question I had. 4 11-foot lanes, not safer. This is the safest design and most efficient design.
I believe it's the safest design. And then there was one other question about why not stripe the whole thing with 3 lanes so we can see if it works.
Right. You don't have the right turn lanes.
Yeah, you don't have the right turn lanes at 19th and 22nd. I can assure you that it won't work. We actually looked at it without the turn lanes, and it's gridlock. Okay. So the rest of the road is fine.
Okay. So I guess here's the direction that I would give you as mayor is keep the 3 lanes that you've got, but make the design as tight as you possibly can. Do it sounds like people are for the 5-foot sidewalk, but maybe not, wiring the house for some future technology. Don't do the trail across people's driveways. Do the 5-foot sidewalk, make the design as tight as you can, move to that sidewalk as close to the street as you possibly can. And that's what I think is, what I'm hearing is the safest, most efficient tonight. And I guess I would just go down, starting with Councilman Hudson.
Somebody wants to say something, Russ.
Yeah, come on up. This is the last comment of the night.
Thank you.
Yep.
Dennis Blue.
You got 3 minutes, sir.
Ashworth Road. I would just like to know about the right-hand turn lanes. What can you take a look at not going into the properties for that? Because at the T intersections, you don't need the left turn lane because there's a property to the left. You're not going to turn into that property. So you can redirect by paint and or curbing islands to get the 2 lanes each direction and a right-hand turn lane without having to cut into the properties as shown. Can you take a look at that and present to the board, the council, what that might look like and how that would work? Only the T intersections. At the intersections like at 39th Street, you already have a 4-way intersection, and you're going to have to cut into those yards properties to get that right turn lane. But I would just propose that you look at not getting into those properties where there's a T intersection.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay, we're going to go to Greg. Greg, anything you want to see from Brian? I would suggest that we come back and have another discussion here at the next council meeting. 3 lanes, 5-foot sidewalk, anything else that you want?
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about it. I'm looking at this chart right here when it comes to the alternatives. I drive home Ashworth every single day. Eric, I don't know if you're still here right on the corner. Your house is beautiful, by the way. I didn't know it was that old. That's really cool. But, so I drive Ashworth. Now, granted, it's from Valley High School where I teach and then go west. But, it's pretty narrow, and I think it's 10 feet wide out there versus 9 feet wide. If it's 9 feet wide times 4 lanes, that's 36 feet. If the desire is to keep four lanes, I mean, that will necessarily eat into 8 feet, 10 feet, 12 feet of the right of way. So if there's any desire to keep the 4 lanes, and please reach out to, I think all of us would love to hear more, because this is a big decision. There's a lot of moving pieces.
Is there anything else you'd like engineering to consider and bring back to the council besides the design that we just talked about? 5-foot sidewalks, forget the trail thing across people's driveways, move the sidewalks as close to the curb as you possibly can, still allowing for snow to be deposited there, and the 3-lane configuration with the right-hand turn lanes. Is there anything else, Greg, that you'd like to see?
Well, I think, and I was about to get to it, so
okay.
My apologies.
Go ahead.
So I think the concern of right-of-way is especially great with the folks who live between 19th and 22nd Street, because going back to that map, you don't have to go back right now, but it's incredibly tight there. So I just really want to encourage engineering. I imagine you've already reached out with the folks who live right there, because what is there? 20 houses between 19th and 22nd Street, maybe 30, I don't know. But whatever solution we come up with, it's got to be all right for the folks who live there, because if people are speeding right now, actually I don't know if people will speed more with a 3-lane versus 4-lane. My actually inclination of knowing high school students pretty well is that at times when it's not busy at all, it's not a 12-foot lane on Ashworth, it's a 20-foot lane on Ashworth for those high school students, so they're really, really going down. So I'm not exactly convinced that 3 lanes will necessarily, speed things up, but I think as long as we're talking to the folks on 19th and 22nd Street, that'll be great. Councilman McKinney.
Okay, so no other alternatives to consider?
Nope.
Okay.
In terms of alternatives to consider, I guess this has been helpful for me. I think I shared that when we started, I had less heartburn about the street, and I definitely have concern about it. And I've backed out a lot of driveways on Ashworth, and I've waited a long time on Ashworth. And I can envision backing out and trying to get up to speed. When somebody's in the other lane, it's a little bit easier. You don't have to worry about it. I know you're not wanting that. So I guess let me go back to, I have concern, right? I don't know if there's a way to keep a 4-foot sidewalk and have maybe additional width within the 4 lanes. I know we talked about a 5-foot sidewalk. If you take that 5 feet down to 4 feet and add that additional foot or so to the street, keep 4 lanes, I don't know if that helps, but I don't like the concept of the garbage truck, the bus, the Amazon truck, and nobody wants to sit behind that, and that is a legitimate concern, as well as backing out driveways. I don't know how to do
Brian,
it.
we're going to add to this 4 lanes with a 4-foot sidewalk, moved as close to the street as you possibly can. That's what you'd like to see?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. And keep in mind, everything that we're throwing out here, we need to not only consider the people that are here tonight, but the entire city that's going to be using this and what safety standards are and everything else. And that's what I expect when we talk about this and give direction to engineering next. That's what we got to take into account. It's not just everybody here, but what the most safe, most efficient design is going to be. So, okay, Renee, anything else that you'd like to have them consider?
Well, I think the alternatives that were previously discussed are, I don't have any additional ones to add. I just want to say, thanks for everybody being here. I appreciate folks' comments. I think where we go, as you've said, Mayor, is not just limited to the people that are in the audience here, but the greater city. Because there are other folks that are involved and interested in Ashworth versus also beyond the people that are in this room or live there. So I just want to say, too, as tough as this night has been for Brian, I want to say thank you, Brian. There's not very many people that have a job, or there's 80 people that are talking and expressing concerns. So regardless of whether we agree with what he's proposing or what we proposed, it takes a lot to still maintain grace and poise in the midst of opposition or whatever. And I think that's worthy of acknowledging, really. I know we might say he gets paid for it, but it's still tough. It's still tough. So I want to say thanks for not losing your cool and still being there and listening and open, because that's what all this process is about. So I'm glad that we got the trail thing settled. I mean, we got that settled early, so I think that stopped some of the hemorrhaging early on in our discussion. So the alternatives that were shared today would be nice to hear. It's a work in process, but thank you for everything that you've done to bring this forward to this point in time, and thanks for all the citizens that are here to express their thoughts and views as well. So this is what engagement at the local level is all about, at its finest.
Thank you, Renee. Okay, Kevin.
To piggyback off Renee, Brian, I wasn't being, don't take it personal.
I love you,
okay? All right, we've known each other a long time. I mean, we don't,
You're fine.
But I can't support the 3-lane. I like Matt's idea of going to a 4-foot sidewalk. I understand what you say about, it is tight. Cindy and I walk our neighborhoods on a regular basis, okay, but you can do it. Look at the 4-foot sidewalk, 10 and a half, 11-foot lanes. I think that's the safer way to go, for the fact that you don't have the continual line of cars and people trying to get out and, shooting the gap or making illegal moves to drive down a turn lane to get around somebody and then risk hitting somebody head on because I was coming down the turn lane. What are you doing going straight? So, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Doug?
I'm going to be the technology dork here up on the council. Given some of my background, I would like to ask about the software we use. Can you do massive amounts of machine learning simulations under the different scenarios that are proposed and use those to do a statistical analysis on that? I have clients on my insurance software that I'm part owner of, that they run hundreds of millions of simulations through it to understand what's the impact of a hurricane going to be in this area or a tornado. Does that exist today, and do we have access to it?
As far as traffic modeling goes?
Yes.
I don't know. Is Eric still here? Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
Hi, Eric.
You took your tie off. Or did you not have one there?
He realized we were going to be here for a while.
Like, I would like us to explore that, and I can help with that a little bit potentially. But we should be able to run hundreds of millions of cars through the different scenarios along Ashworth and understand where the anomalies occur, because I know that tech exists today.
We have models of the different scenarios that we've looked at.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something that we could easily
we've got it.
provide.
Yeah.
So you could see what it looks like, what Kevin and Matt are proposing. We could show what that would look like. We could show what we've already got what we're proposing. So, yeah.
Yeah, because I think I would like to see the statistical distributions of those scenarios at various junctions on Ashworth, so 19th, 22nd. You know, I literally drive in and out of 801 Ashworth. My buddy owns that place, right? And my wife was all excited for me to get out of the house during COVID, so I rented it from him, and I drive there every day, so I'm very familiar with that. I'd like to see what those look like.
Yeah, and to be honest, I'll get up here to say this, but the 3-lane is something that we tried to do as a compromise for everybody in this neighborhood, so that we wouldn't have to go intrude farther into their properties. Now, one thing that we do have to take into consideration if we do widen a little more with the road is we're going to be into a lot of utilities. So that's just something to consider. But those are all things that will bring you the pros and cons list.
Yep.
Is this something, and now I want to make sure I'm clear, or I'm sorry, were you all finished?
I'm done.
Okay. Are we going to bring this back to?
I don't think we'll be ready in 2 weeks,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor. I mean, we got to have some
Okay.
time to do a little
right.
deeper dig.
Right. But I guess my question was, do we bring this back to the full council? Do we take it to subcommittee? What would you
I think
like
you
us
bring
to
it
do?
back to the full council. We do a mini workshop at the end of one of the council meetings and give you direction based on these scenarios. And frankly, I'll be honest with you, one of the scenarios just put in there that we don't do anything.
Right.
I'm not sure that's something that is smart, but, let's put it in there. Because, I want to consider all scenarios, and I don't want to spend a bunch of taxpayer money to make a big difference on safety on this road and everything else, and just have this tiny little, that to me is one of the worst scenarios, is that we do something like this, 4-lane,
Right.
10-foot, whatever, you barely notice a difference, you still have issues with mirrors hitting each other potentially, and we just spent millions of dollars to do it. So,
Right.
so I think you add another scenario where we do nothing and we walk away, and the next time somebody says something to us about Ashworth, we say, it is what it is. Don't drive down
We
it.
can't do nothing. Because
Still got to rebuild the road.
We got the
Rebuild the road. Rebuild the road.
Just as is.
Just as is.
Brian,
An asphalt overlay.
I have a
Asphalt
specific question that everybody, I would love 4 lanes. I love 4 lanes. You have no idea how much I love 4 lanes. Brian,
He loves
I
4
love
lanes.
4 lanes.
He's got Greg at 4lanes.com.
But when it comes to making 4 lanes, 12, quiet you. When it comes to 12 feet down to 11 feet, I want to know the amount of land that we're going to have to take from these folks' yards if we're switching to 4 lanes. And I know that's why I asked about the green space, the parkway earlier, several hours earlier, it feels, because if we make it 4 lanes, even if it's 11-foot lanes instead of 12-foot lanes, my gosh, we're going to have to eat 5, 6, 7, 8 feet into people's yards. I want to know how little can we take. It's really, really important to me, because the entire reason why we're saying no to that trail is because we don't want to eat into your yard. And if we're just replacing one thing with another, then I just don't see it. But I could be wrong, and if I am wrong, please email me, and I know I will hear from you. So
You've got several very obvious things. Number one, what's the design that takes the least amount of land from people? What's the design that's the most safe? What's the design that is the most efficient? We want to be looking at all those things, and obviously with every one of these scenarios have the tightest design possible, where if you have a 4-foot sidewalk, a 5-foot sidewalk, you move the sidewalk as close to the road as you can, still having safety standards, still with Brett being able to dump his snow on it. You understand where we're going.
Is there a time constraint here at all? Like,
Guys.
does this have to be figured out in 6 months, or?
Well,
This is going to be the last question of the night. Go ahead.
I've got one request, though.
The time constraint is, right now we don't have a funding source. So we have a funding source for getting the design done, but we don't have a funding source for the road itself. So that's something that we have to work through. But our plan was, if we could get the funding, to construct in 2024. And if we're going to do that, we have to have, we could push it out to 2025, and I don't know how much longer the pavement is going to last. Jason, I don't know. I know it looks great now, but that everything under it is not great. So, and that's the reason why we're not continually overlaying. We just did overlays on several sections of this road. So we're not going to reconstruct those sections of the road until they're ready until they're falling apart. So that, we're not poor stewards of the taxpayer dollars. We've been doing this like this for decades. I mean, we've had this pavement management system for decades, so we're not going to throw money away to just to do it.
Right.
So I just want to make sure you and everybody here hears that.
And again, when we consider this, we're going to be considering safety of everybody, these people as well as other people in the community.
Right. I drive the road
How much
too.
land we take, where the
kids
snow
drive.
goes,
Yeah.
and we got to come up with the best decision. As I said when I started this, we may not have a win-win scenario. People might be more happy than they were before, but they may not love it. We got to come up with the best decision we can as a council on all those factors and make a decision. And one of those decisions could be just leave the road alone. So,
to your point with that, I think
Yeah,
it's
we're-
very important for Brian to have that data on leaving the road as it is, because that gives you something to compare what you want to do with how bad will the accidents be if we leave it as it is, repairing it just as it is. That needs to be done so that they can prove what is the safest design.
Okay,
above
appreciate it.
complete.
We are adjourned. Workshop is done.
Brian, don't run off yet.